Good morning and welcome. It's my privilege to call this hearing to order. I would like to thank our witnesses for taking time away from your families and your farms to share your expertise with our committee today. Before we get started, I want to take a moment to thank Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins for her announcement today on a bold strategy to address avian influenza. The virus continues to threaten our poultry and dairy farmers with ripple effects throughout the food supply chain. I applaud the Trump administration for prioritizing response from day one. This hearing is the second of a series to examine the state of the agriculture economy by getting the perspective of leading producers across our country. These hearings are meant to help the committee understand the challenges our farmers and rural communities currently face as we work to pass a 5-year farm bill. In our first hearing, we heard that from some of our major farm groups and row crop producers about their unique experiences. Today, I'm delighted to welcome 2 additional very important constituencies to the discussion. First, we'll hear from several specialty crop growers and stakeholders from various parts of the country. The specialty crop industry continues to face unique pressures: the high cost of labor, competition with cheap imports, pest and disease, limited access to risk management tools, and the list goes on and on. Our second panel will feature livestock, poultry, and dairy producers. While they have seen some improvement in economic conditions in recent years, significant headwinds remain. Livestock production remains highly capital intensive, and high interest rates and elevated production costs have trimmed margins. Animal disease threats like avian influenza and New World screwworm have added tremendous uncertainty across all aspects. Burdensome government regulation at both the federal and state level have also threatened the viability of livestock operations. For example, California's Prop 12 has required many of our pork producers to spend millions of dollars retrofitting their barns while costing the California consumers nearly $300 million annually. In the next farm bill, it's critical we improve risk management tools to support both our specialty crops and livestock producers. It's important to continue investing in our research and marketing programs. We must invest in our animal health programs to prevent and respond to disease outbreaks. And we must address regulatory overreach burdening all producers. I'm confident the members on this committee stand willing and ready to roll up our sleeves and get to work in passing a new farm bill. I look forward to hearing from today's witnesses, and I now turn to Ranking Member Klobuchar for opening comments.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Chair Bozeman, and thank you to all our witnesses, including Lori Stevemer, who's here from Minnesota, with our pork producers, as well as John Zimmerman from our state with the turkey producers. So we're excited to have them here. There was bipartisan agreement during our last hearing that our committee should continue to work together to ensure that farmers and consumers have the certainty that they need in a difficult economy. This means passing a bipartisan farm bill that is reflective of the needs of the people of this nation. It also means tackling today's challenges head-on, whether they are avian flu, whether they're input costs, whether they're these potential tariffs that I do not agree with, or just want to put a footnote on that, or whether they are ensuring that our farmers and ranchers have the tools they need to thrive. Our witnesses today are going to shed light on the challenges facing our farmers, including those who grow fruits and vegetables. And I really appreciated the words of Chair Bozeman about the headwinds that these farmers face. We also are going to focus on those who milk cows day in and day out, those who raise the high-quality beef and pork and poultry that fuels us. Today's first panel, as noted, is going to focus on specialty crops. And I think instead of calling them specialty crops, given that they're everything from potato to asparagus to apples to the chilies from New Mexico, which is way too hot for Minnesota, but I can't wait to try them. We should call them omnipresent crops. They're crops that really matter to the people of this country. According to the most recent census of agriculture, there are over 5,000 farms in Senator Smith's and my state growing these crops, representing over $3 billion in market value. And that's why the specialty crop block grant program is so important. Other things we can do as we look at this, the challenges ahead, is we can improve crop insurance options for these growers and give them the tools they need to prevent devastating pests and disease outbreaks. And we can protect our investments in critical nutrition programs, allowing Americans to afford more fruits and vegetables. We must stand with these farmers as they face the workforce shortages, emerging diseases, import pressures that threaten their economic viability. And the one thing we don't want to do is to make things worse. Our second panel will focus on our poultry, livestock, and dairy farmers. Now more than ever, we must support our poultry and livestock producers as their farms are hit by avian flu. This outbreak has impacted more than 160 million birds and nearly 1,000 dairy herds across the country, causing economic hardship for producers and driving up food costs for their families. I look forward to reading and learning about the proposal set forward by the Secretary of Agriculture today. It was the #1 thing I raised with her, and we look forward to reviewing it, and I'm sure we'll always have suggestions. We must follow the science to build on the existing national testing strategies and support for farmers, engaging with experts to develop new prevention and response methods and a thoughtful vaccine strategy. Any vaccine strategy must be supported by, of course, field trials, clear plan for outreach and deployment, and proactive engagement with our trading partners to mitigate market disruptions. This also means keeping nonpartisan experts in the federal government, including veterinarians, animal disease researchers, frontline animal disease responders. My colleagues and I, of course, have pressed when some of these people were laid off. I understand some of them are being rehired, but we just can't mess around with this right now. We must make sure that the USDA has the resources available to respond to this outbreak. This outbreak also underscores the need to invest in the National Animal Health Lab Network, National Animal Vaccine Bank, and the National Animal Disease Preparedness and Response Program. Senator Cornyn and I established these programs in the 2018 Farm Bill, and they were of help during these last outbreaks, but we have to do more. In addition to giving livestock producers the support they need on their farms, we need to make it easier, not harder, to reach new markets. The recent proposal to implement sweeping tariffs on Canada and Mexico, even if delayed 30 days, has already caused chaos in the marketplace and threatens farmers' livelihoods. Our farmers in our state in particular stand to suffer from these tariffs. Around 1 million pigs cross our border with Canada every single year. On top of that, almost 2 weeks ago, the President announced new plans to develop reciprocal tariffs on all countries that would go into effect as soon as April. While we don't know the details of where and how high these new tariffs would be, we do know that agriculture often bears the brunt of retaliatory tariffs, and this puts more markets in jeopardy as farmers try to plan this year. The bottom line is that our farmers need certainty. The certainty of a fair playing field and transparent practices for all, the certainty that we are investing in the research and response programs that protect their crops and their flocks, and the certainty in trade policy to continue doing what they do best, feeding and fueling the world. All of this will be important to keep in mind as we continue the committee's task of passing a bipartisan farm bill. As I've said often, I am so excited to work with Senator Boozman and our team, excited about our new members. There's Senator Slotkin at the end of the row that are on this committee, and Senator Justice, and work together to get a farm bill done. It couldn't be more important. So thank you very much, Chair Boozman.
No, thank you. And I also am really excited about our committee this year. We just simply have a great committee of a lot of outstanding individuals. Before we begin introducing our first panel of witnesses, I request unanimous consent to submit for the record a number of written testimonies and materials the committee has received for today's hearing. Without objection, so ordered. We will now introduce the first panel of witnesses, Mr. Bret Erickson. I'm happy to introduce Bret, who serves as chair of the U.S. Government Relations Council for the International Fresh Produce Association. Bret lives in the Rio Grande Valley in Texas and is a senior executive for J&D Produce, which is a family-owned and operated grower, packer, shipper of more than 40 products. I had the pleasure of meeting Bret last year during a farm bill listening session in Texas with Senator Cornyn. Bret, thank you so much for being here today. Mr. Jeremy Hinton, Senator McConnell, was unable to be with us this morning, but he is very proud to have Jeremy Hinton here before the committee today. I'm submitting Senator McConnell's remarks regarding Jeremy into the record. Without objection, so ordered. Jeremy Hinton is an eighth generation. I got to slow down. Jeremy Hinton is an eighth generation farmer from Kentucky. He and his wife Joanna own and operate a diversified farming operation that, in addition to soybeans and burley tobacco, includes two direct-to-consumer farm markets, selling a variety of greenhouse flowers, herbs, fruits, and vegetables. Jeremy, again, thank you for being here. Dr. Tim Boring. Dr. Tim Boring serves as the director of the, are you going to introduce? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yes.
Senator Slotkin.
Senator Slotkin.
Thank you. Thank you for not stealing my thunder, Mr.
Yeah,
Chairman.
exactly.
It's an honor to introduce Tim Boring, the Director of Michigan's Department of Agriculture and Rural Development, or MDART, as we call it. Director Boring supports the department's commitment to investing in our state's urban and rural farming communities, providing opportunities for food and ag businesses, protecting consumers from the pump to the plate, and preserving Michigan's amazing natural resources, particularly our Great Lakes. He approaches those issues with a focus on economic prosperity, regenerative ag, and diversifying agricultural production across the state. We like to say in Michigan that we used to say that we were the second most diverse agricultural state in the country after California. We have changed the tagline. We are the most diverse agricultural state in the country with regular access to water. So we
And you are doing that when Senator Schiff is out of the room?
He's out of the room. I managed it. I told him to get out before I started picking on California. He is a sixth-generation farmer in Stockbridge, Michigan. I have visited his farms, his family farm. So this is personal to him. He's got his PhD from Michigan State University, Go Green, and I've had the pleasure of working with him for many, many years. I just want to take a particular moment in saying what Mr. Boring has done in preventing avian flu in the state of Michigan. Michigan was hit early with avian flu, and I think watching the state of Michigan, again, without regard to party, without regard to politics, just doing what we needed to do to control the outbreak and spread of avian flu has been really an example for the rest of the country. So for all he does every day for our specialty crops, I know we have our potato farmers in the room and others. Thank you to Tim Boring, and I'm glad to share his wisdom with the greater panel here.
Thank you. Senator Hyde-Smith will introduce Ms. Rhinewalt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much. And it is my pleasure to introduce one of our witnesses today from Mississippi. And I had the pleasure of meeting with her earlier. And such a delightful meeting. And I so appreciate your efforts and you being here today. We have Miss Anna Rhinewalt. She and her brother and her husband operate Sandy Ridge Farms in Senatobia, Mississippi. And she has just completed a 3-year term serving on the Mississippi Farm Bureau Federation State Young Farmers and Ranchers Committee, which is so viable in our state and such a good organization. She currently serves on the Mississippi Sweet Potato Council Board, as well as on the Mississippi Farm Bureau Labor Committee, which we all know the issues with labor. Thank you for your efforts there. And just last year, Anna was named the 2024 Mississippi Farm Woman of the Year. So we just want to welcome you today, and I'm sure there's several people watching you, and I bet Evelyn Ruth and Eleanor Grace are watching you today as well. She's the mother of two, but you sure do a great job where you are, and I thank you for representing Mississippi as well as you do.
Very good. Senator Lujan will introduce Mr. Etcheverry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's an honor to introduce Mr. Ben Etcheverry, a dedicated community leader, agricultural expert, and Chile advocate from Deming, New Mexico. Mr. Etcheverry is a leader of New Mexico's farming community and works tirelessly to represent the priorities of our local farmers. As the president of the New Mexico Chile Association, he plays a crucial role in promoting and protecting New Mexico's pride and joy, our Chile, and that's with an E, not with an I. Mr. Etcheverry was raised on an alfalfa farm in Carlsbad, New Mexico, where his life in agriculture began. He's also the proud husband of Jessica and the proud father of Samuel. Currently, Mr. Etcheverry is the Agricultural Operations Crop Manager of Alam Food Ingredients Chili Pepper Division in Deming, where he oversees a plant breeding program specializing in chili pepper genetic innovation. He has dedicated his career to ensuring the chili industry thrives in our state and preserving this important agriculture tradition for future farmers and chili lovers. Now, as was pointed out, there's sometimes some heat involved with our chili products, but I'm telling you, it's always flavorful. So for those of you that have not fallen in love with it yet, you let me know and I'll serve it for you. I'll prepare it myself. Mr. Etcheverry holds both an undergraduate and a master's degree in agribusiness from New Mexico State University. Now, while attending NMSU, he was employed by the Chili Pepper Institute. His time at NMSU fostered his love of chili production and New Mexico agriculture. With a lifetime of experience in the field, he has built a deep understanding of the industry and its impact on New Mexico's economy and culture. Ben, I want to recognize your extensive knowledge and experience. We appreciate you being here today, and especially the sacrifice of all of our panelists, taking time away from your families, from your responsibilities at home to be here as well. This matters, and these conversations matter as well. So thanks for having us. I yield back.
We look forward to some Lujan chili.
Yes, sir.
Again, thank all of you so much for being here. Mr. Erickson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Bozeman, Ranking Member Klobuchar, members of the committee. Little Bear Produce is a family-owned grower, packer, shipper, and fresh cut processor headquartered in Edinburgh, Texas. Jimmy and Diane Bassetti came to Texas from Vineland, New Jersey in 1984 and started a small mom-and-pop brokerage, which has grown into a multinational agribusiness employing nearly 200 full-time employees with comprehensive benefits, including health and life insurance and 401ks. We also hire an additional 500 to 600 seasonal workers, primarily through H2A to harvest and pack our products. Labor costs remain the biggest threat to the future of the U.S. fresh produce growers. In Texas, our labor costs have essentially doubled in just 5 years. We're currently at $23 an hour for our cost. The federally mandated adverse effect wage rate inflates labor costs beyond market realities, making it difficult to compete with foreign producers. We urge USDA to revise the Farm Labor Survey to reflect base wages only. Additionally, we would request USDA to appoint an ag liaison to the Department of Labor to help guide policy that impacts food and farm production. Texas farmers are facing severe water shortages, in part due to Mexico's failure to meet its obligation under the 1944 Water Treaty. Mexico is required to deliver 200,000 acre-feet of water per year. They are now in debt 1.3 million acre-feet, which is over 6 years behind schedule. While other regions pray for recovery from hurricane disasters, we are literally praying for hurricanes to refill our reservoirs. Less than 10 years ago, we were paying about $30 per acre-foot of water. Today, it's as high as $225 per acre-foot and climbing. That's if we can find it. Meanwhile, Mexico is withholding 6 years' worth of water and using it to grow competing crops like onions and pecans. On Farm Bill priorities, specialty crops represent nearly half the total U.S. farm gate crop value, yet they receive less than 1% of Farm Bill funding. We would urge investments in research and development for increased yield, sustainability, mechanization, and automation, expanded crop insurance. Texas produces nearly 65 specialty crops. We have insurance programs for 3. Market development support to stabilize pricing and competitiveness, and federal procurement reform to increase specialty crop purchases. On crop protection and regulatory challenges, fresh produce growers are rapidly losing access to essential pest management tools. As key pesticides and herbicides are phased out, there are few viable alternatives and even fewer in the EPA's approval pipeline. A recent example is Dactol, an herbicide we relied on for onion production. After 50 years of safe use, the EPA abruptly canceled it last year with no comparable replacement. EPA has yet to provide guidance on viable alternatives. This creates instability for growers, which in turn creates opportunity for foreign producers. We urge Congress to restrain regulatory overreach and bureaucratic red tape. On trade and economic competitiveness, fair trade is critical for fresh produce growers. A recent Texas A&M study highlighted USDA ERS data showing an eye-popping decline in the U.S. fresh produce trade balance. You all should have that chart in your papers. It began in the early 90s and it has accelerated through 2022. Like many in our industry, our company imports from Mexico to supplement our U.S. production in order to provide our customers a consistent year-round supply, but only when we are out of season. At the end of the day, pricing is king. But how can a U.S. grower compete on cilantro, onions, parsley, or watermelons when my labor cost is $23 per man-hour and a foreign producer pays their worker $18 per day and operates under less regulation? That is not a fair playing field. On the flip side, we sell a lot of product to our Canadian friends. They are incredible customers who value good quality. They love fresh produce. They also buy Canadian grown whenever available. They will not bring in our product when they're in season. I admire that and believe we could learn a lesson from our friends to the north. Protect your growers, they keep you fed. In closing, over the last 3 decades, U.S. fruit and vegetable production has declined while imports have surged, and the reason is clear. Misguided U.S. policies and excessive regulation have created a tilted market, pushing production out of the U.S. and into the arms of cheaper, less regulated foreign producers. Once our production is lost, it is not likely to return. The barriers to entry are too high, and the cost of land, equipment, and labor make it nearly impossible for new farmers to enter the business. We should protect and preserve what remains of our specialty crop production in the interest of our national security and the future wellness of our country. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. God bless our farmers. I'm happy to answer your questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hinton.
Good morning, Chairman Boozman, Ranking Member Klobuchar, and members of the committee. I would like to begin today with a quote. No other human occupation opens so wide a field for the profitable and agreeable combination of labor with cultivated thought as agriculture. These are words of our 16th president, Abraham Lincoln, who was born only a few miles from our family's farm near Hodgenville, Kentucky. As an 8th-generation farmer in LaRue County, my connection to agriculture traces back to the time that Lincoln wandered the fields around his home. First, with a farming operation that looks different from my grandfather's Hereford cattle farm, and second, as a crop insurance agent, helping other farmers manage their risks. While our operation includes soybeans and burley tobacco, our main focus is nearly 30 edible crops from apples to zucchini and our greenhouse flowers and vegetable plants. Most of our sales are direct to consumers through our 2 retail markets and local farmers markets. My wife Joanna and I began the business in 2002 and are both involved daily with production and marketing of our crops, along with our 3 children, ages 20, 17, and 11. As this committee develops the next farm bill, you must plan for both the present and the future. My work on the farm and in crop insurance requires a similar focus. While most traditional row crop acres are covered under the federal crop insurance programs, participation for specialty crop growers is often more complicated. Because sporadic geographic distribution limits policy availability, agents and growers must often work to insure specialty crops under RMA-approved written agreements. Whole farm and its companion microfarm policies are good options, but can be complicated for both farmers and agents and have not been widely adapted. In 2024, for example, there were only 6 whole farm policies and 4 microfarm policies written in Kentucky, compared to nearly 7,000 policies for soybeans. Efforts are being made by RMA and organizations like Kentucky Horticulture Council, which I chair, to increase awareness and understanding of options for specialty crops, but many growers still do not understand how they work for their operation. So we look for solutions to better manage risks in specialty crops. Possible solutions may include improvements to whole farm, a rainfall and temperature index product similar to PRF that could have consideration for both excess and below normal conditions, or expanded revenue products for specialty crops, but based on farm records rather than tax returns. While each of these have challenges, I encourage you to engage with RMA, the crop insurance industry, and specialty crop growers to help find solutions. Labor is another area that requires specialty crop growers to work in the moment while keeping an eye on the future. I think other members are going to address that, so I'm going to move on. As we work for a better future, specialty crop growers are especially dependent on the resources of Extension and our land-grant universities. Extension recommendations for disease and pest control and fertility in our crops is invaluable to our success. Your support is vital to research and direct technical assistance delivered by our colleges of agriculture. A true focus on the future must also recognize the loss of farmland to development in Kentucky and across the nation. According to the Census of Agriculture, Kentucky lost more than 546,000 acres of farmland from 2017 to 2022, or more than 290 acres per day. For context, the average farm size in Kentucky is 179 acres. Kentucky Farm Bureau, through creation of the Kentucky Farmland Transition Initiative, is working with stakeholders at both the state and federal levels to provide resources and education, network opportunities, and develop policy recommendations. I urge your involvement in developing solutions to this important issue. While on one hand, new neighbors meet new customers for retail markets like ours, we must find a balance between well-planned development and farmland preservation to ensure the future of our farms and our rural communities. Despite many challenges, there are many positives in the specialty crop segment of agriculture. In direct-to-consumer sales, we see increased demand for locally grown products and for building relationships with those who want to know the farmer feeding their families. A new farm bill is an opportunity to increase purchases of locally grown foods for schools, hospitals, and other state and federal institutions, and to open additional markets for our products and improve the health of our communities. By focusing on the issues of today and the future, I look forward to my children becoming the 9th generation of my family farm the lands where Lincoln walked. I want to thank each of you for your willingness to serve and for your work to ensure a healthy agriculture industry and a safe, stable food supply. It's been an honor for me to address this group, and I look forward to answering any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Bourne.
Good morning, Chairman Bozeman, Ranking Member Klobuchar, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to participate today. My focus will be on specialty crops, their importance, the challenges and opportunities the growers and consumers face as you continue to work on a farm bill. Members of this committee can foster the success of specialty crops today and for years to come, and I'm looking forward to the constructive solutions and policy decisions that will come out of this hearing. As a junior senator from Michigan, Senator Alyssa Slotkin likes to point out, food security is national security, and I believe the next farm bill serves as the crossroads for whether or not we take that fact seriously. There's a perspective I bring to the hearing today as the director of the Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development. I'm proud to lead a state agency of dedicated public servants who are committed to providing opportunities for our food and agricultural businesses, lifting up our rural communities, and preserving Michigan's natural resources. Agriculture is a $105 billion industry for Michigan, and I consider our specialty crop farmers the backbone of our success with more than 300 specialty crops produced in our state. Since your invitation was extended for my testimony, I've been asked by producers to share just how vital specialty crop support programs are for their existence. Unfortunately, for many specialty crops, times have never been more tenuous. What once provided an avenue for farmers to diversify their products has forced many to choose whether or not their farm will welcome back the next generation. Whether it's due to trade pressures, rising input costs, climate variability, labor constraints, the threats of pests and disease, many specialty crop countries in this country are either harder to grow, more difficult to get to market, or challenging as ever to reach the consumer. In the interest of time this morning, I want to highlight some key areas that are either currently supported in the Farm Bill or need to become a priority, as well as share some of what we're doing in Michigan that is seeing success and deserves more attention at a federal level. First, public sector research has been critical for specialty crops, specifically specialty crop block grants that are currently supported by a specialty crop research initiative. These investments have been instrumental in keeping farmers one step ahead of the next disease or pest threat. For instance, last year in Michigan, cherry farmers lost between 30 and 75% of their crops because of abnormal weather events that drove unprecedented insect and pest pressure. Losses such as these are becoming far more common. A farm bill that provides grower support, such as through new research, helps ensure the continuation of family farms in the face of these unprecedented challenges and is critical for the long-term viability of specialty crops in Michigan and across the country. Another area the growers have made clear needs continued support is the Marketing Assistance for Specialty Crop Program, which helps growers expand domestic markets and develop new markets for their crops. At a time when there are so many unknowns with our trade partnerships, fostering stronger domestic markets will be critical for the success of our growers. Finally, I want to share two areas where we're seeing success in Michigan thanks to Governor Gretchen Whitmer investing state dollars in new flagship programs, our Regenerative Agriculture Unit and the new Farm to Family program. Regenerative agriculture is an active approach to land management driven by improving soil health. Our regenerative agriculture unit, the first of its kind embedded in the State Department, supports producers engaging in this approach to production agriculture. By adopting regen ag practices, farmers and landowners can improve profitability, restore healthy soils, and safeguard natural resources for future generations. Commodity row crop operators have been on the front lines of integrating many of these practices, but they're equally important for specialty crop growers. Our Farm to Family program is also a first-of-its-kind effort, working to strengthening agri-food systems, bolstering market demand for products, and increasing food access and availability. Our first investment through this initiative is a middle-of-the-supply chain program supporting food hubs and farm stops, which are innovative models of market outlets, aggregation, and distribution that are important value chain nodes for a variety of specialty crops in our state. Together, these programs are working to add value to the crops grown on Michigan farms and get those crops to the people of Michigan. I share all this today because the support of our specialty crops directly translates to the tools that keeps farmers farming, keeps rural communities vibrant, and keeps fruit and vegetables on the dinner plates across America. Thank you again for the opportunity this morning, and I look forward to questions from the committee.
Thank you. Ms. Rhinewalt.
Chairman Bozeman, Ranking Member Klobuchar, and other distinguished members of this committee, thank you for inviting me today to testify about the current state of our farm economy. Our nation has experienced many years blessed with a robust and successful farm economy, but current conversations around farm office tables and mailboxes full of farm dispersal sales tell a vastly different story of what happened in the last 5 years. New equipment is 30 to 40% higher. Many parts and repairs have doubled or tripled. Pack house supplies for specialty crop producers have increased by at least 50%. Wage rates have increased in our state by 30%. Farmers who were once profitable enough to finance themselves are now paying 8 to 10% interest rates on multi-million-dollar operating loans just to try to stay afloat. These increases are taking hundreds of thousands of dollars off of farmers' bottom lines every year. Some of these same farmers have experienced unprecedented weather events that have diminished and destroyed their crops. And finally, market pricing for crops like soybeans and sweet potatoes has been stagnant, if not in decline. Farmers are trying to claw their way out, but they cannot pay their debts with losses. Specialty crop producers like me are faced with another variable that, if not addressed soon, is going to be the catalyst for our closure. The number of messages I've received in the last 24 hours regarding this testimony has made an impression on me. There are so many constituents watching today. I sense they are encouraged that this hearing was called, and they are hopeful that you're listening and will help us. While I understand this committee doesn't have direct jurisdiction over the H-2A program reform, I urge you to share my testimony with your colleagues to make them aware that we are desperate for relief. The adverse effect wage rate was initially established to protect domestic farm workers from foreign worker wage depression. But decades later, the domestic workforce has almost entirely moved away from own farm jobs. In 2023, of the 380,000 H-2A eligible positions, only 10,000 domestic applications were received. 97% went unanswered. Since 2019, the AWR in our state has risen almost 31%, resulting in an additional $12 million impact to Mississippi sweet potato growers annually. We don't understand why the rate continues to rise so dramatically, using the rationale that it is to protect a domestic workforce that no longer exists. Seasonality restrictions are also affecting our farmers. We increasingly need a year-round solution. Our long-term domestic crews are dwindling, and there don't seem to be any new workers willing to fill the gap. Some farms are closing for 2 months, missing critical sales until their H-2A workers return. Finally, in the last 24 months, the Department of Labor has issued over 3,000 pages of H-2A rulings. Please understand, H-2A workers live on our farms with our families for months at a time. We have very positive relationships with our workers. To suggest that it requires thousands of regulations to establish a fair, safe, and mutually beneficial employer-employee arrangement is offensive to farmers. Our livelihoods are inextricably linked to the presence and quality of our workforce. We appreciate the willingness of our H-2A workers, and we understand the sacrifices they make to provide a better life for their families, much like we do. We support a straightforward, common-sense program that protects our workers without burying us under a mountain of policy. I hope my testimony today has provoked a sense of urgency. This situation is playing out in families all across our country. I ask that you assess the ramifications of the loss of food production from within our borders. Food grown and raised domestically is safer, of a higher quality, and it is most importantly a matter of national security. We are so close to losing the American farm. Please help us pave a way forward, remove our obstacles, and lead our country into a renewed awareness that without food, nothing else matters. Thank you for holding today's hearing, and I would be pleased to answer any questions the committee may have.
Thank you, Mr. Etcheverry.
I am incredibly proud to represent the chili capital of the world as the president of the New Mexico Chili Association and share my perspective on the agricultural economy. Thank you, Chairman Bozeman and Ranking Member Klobuchar and members of the committee. Immigration is a hot debate in America right now, and agricultural labor is closely tied to it. It's nice to be noticed, but these circumstances are less than favorable. As you know, most produce in this country is hand harvested. As such, we have a tremendous need for the human touch and the hard work that comes with it to plant, grow, and harvest our products. As our economy is developed, far less people pursue work on the farm. With this challenge, we have become more reliant upon the H-2A program to shore up the gap in agricultural employment. Unlike large acreage crops like corn or cotton, we do not have reliable automation and mechanization options for produce. Consumers demand perfect peppers at the grocery store with no blemishes and any slights thereof. The New Mexico Chili Association has spent a lot of time trying to develop automation solutions for our industry with the help of USDA. This work needs to continue and expand until we solve the riddle for chilies as well as other vegetable crops. While this committee does not have jurisdiction over immigration, I do want to share a few words on this topic. First, the H-2A program, as we know, is broken and it needs to be fixed. The program is expensive, loaded with numerous costs and paperwork involved, and is at times tortuous as best. Second, we need to have a functioning and fair immigration system. I have seen many leaders in my rural community who came to this country long ago and enriched it. There is a middle ground, and it's my hope this committee can use its influence to elevate the need for ag labor reform. Trade and tariffs are also a burning issue, and our growers have seen this issue close up for years. Currently, the domestic red chili production in the Southwest is down by 50% across the board since 2018. This is largely due to foreign paprika being shipped to intermediaries, repackaged as intermediary paprika, then shipped to the U.S. with the landed cost 10 to 15% below the cost of a domestic grower's on-farm price, let alone the cost of dehydration and packaging. I already talked about the need to have federal funding that helps fuel innovation and automation, but I want to highlight 3 additional areas of necessity improvement in the Farm Bill. First, the Specialty Crop Block Grant is incredibly valuable and has helped our growers gain access to marketing materials for increased consumer education. As Senator Lujan knows, we have a wonderful certified program that protects our products so they aren't confused with imports, often gaining our growers a premium. Second, the availability of water, especially in desert-producing regions, is becoming less consistent and reliable, and it's critically important that conversation programs like EQIP be bolstered to help growers use federal matching money to switch to more efficient irrigation systems. Finally, specialty crops have less support, higher risk, and unfortunately a weaker risk mitigation system to rely on than our friends in row crops. Right now, our industry relies on an outdated crop insurance program that USDA helped set up in the 1980s. We need to correct this immediately to help ensure our farm's survival. In closing, due to the efforts of the Farm Bill and the legislative history of this body, we have created a food policy program that has helped us shrug off wars, would-be famines, economically trying times, and set the standard on which the modern agricultural model in the world was created. I implore this Congress to set aside partisan differences to make sure that farmers have the support to continue provisions for enough food to eat and enough food to make sure our next-door neighbors do not go without. Thank you again for this opportunity, and I will look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Mr. Erickson, the trade imbalance on fresh produce is disappointing and is the primary contributor to the growing trade deficit across all of agriculture. What should this committee be thinking about as we work together to evaluate this concern?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. This should be in your information that was submitted to you. This is the fresh produce trade balance from 1980 to 2022. You don't have to be up close to see. This is a pretty vicious picture. This is not fair trade for the specialty crop produce industry. We need controls on the cost of our labor. When I'm paying $23 per man hour and Mexico can grow the same crop and they're paying $18 per day per person, that gap is insurmountable. So we need common sense solutions to help control the cost of our labor. Secondly, water, in the case of Texas, our water situation is threatening our very existence. We farm about 6,000 acres of fruits and vegetables. We grow over 40 different commodities. This year, we left fallow 2,000 acres that we could not farm because we did not have water for it. Because of that, we had to relocate some of our production to outside growers and to other regions. For those of you folks here that use the H2A program, shifting your H2A people around when you haven't put a location on a petition and we're making adjustments on the fly is very difficult. Additionally, at $23 per hour, our cost per person, moving people around from farm to farm is impossible. We need to have them centrally located. So controls on costs in the H2A program, support in pressing Mexico to make regular water payments for us, support through getting the farm bill completed and finding ways to invest in the mechanization and automation, finding ways to stop regulatory overreach, such as when I talked about the EPA, basically from one day to the next, pulling a very important herbicide that we use in onion production that has been in use for 50 years. And essentially from one day to the next, it was pulled away with no options, no input, no alternatives. And we're not, and our foreign competitors are not under that kind of regulatory pressure. So those would be some areas that I would point to that this committee could focus on.
Very good. Thank you. Mrs. Rhinewalt, can you talk more about how the changes to the H2A program over the past several years have affected your day-to-day and what having a voice for agriculture leading the Department of Labor would mean for the specialty crop industry?
Thank you for the question, Senator. Day to day, we're trying to keep our heads above water in response to a wage rate that's taking for our farm an additional $70,000 annually off our bottom line. We've cut where we can to compensate, but we recognize that another increase would be devastating. And to your point about having a voice for agriculture as leader of the DOL, we're very optimistic about President Trump's nominee, Lori Chavez-DeRemer. She seems to be a friend of farmers and an advocate for H2A reform. Recently, she was a member of the House Ag Labor Working Group who drafted a very articulate recommendation for H2A reform that largely has bipartisan support. So we hope if she's confirmed that she'll help us push reform and this new policy over the finish line.
Very good. Mr. Hinton, in your testimony, you noted the challenges faced by many specialty crop producers in finding adequate tools to manage their risk. What are some ways that we can strengthen insurance options for specialty crop growers?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. As I mentioned, one of the most difficult challenges is the geographic distribution of crops and the lack of concentration. I know for Ms. Rhinewalt, there are a lot of sweet potatoes grown in her area, and so that's an insurable crop. But for us, for example, with our operation, peaches are one of the crops that we grow, and peach insurance is available in 3 of the 120 counties in Kentucky. Just because of the lack of historic production. So as we look at that, one option that we have is to insure crops with written agreements. Unfortunately, there's a relatively high standard of proof in terms of the disposition of those crops, where the way that they're sold. For markets like ours that sell directly to consumer, it's very difficult to be able to produce the records, even with a point of sale system, to back up and document where those fruits went when they were sold. Unlike if we have sale tickets for a wholesale purchase, when you're dealing with a direct consumer transactions, it's much more difficult to back up and prove those. So I think there's potential in whole farm and micro farm. It certainly has its places where it fits. I don't think it's the answer for everything. One of my biggest challenges with whole farm is the timing of it. Obviously, when the losses are paid based on tax returns, that means that any losses are not paid until taxes are filed. And so if, for example, for me, if I had a loss in strawberry production that happens in May, it might be a full year from now before I'd be able to collect an indemnity payment for that. So that's one of the challenges. I would encourage further looks at revenue-based products that could be based on farm records instead of those tax returns, that could reduce the burden of record keeping for producers. I think that's one of the most intimidating things about whole farm is the record keeping burden that comes along with this. I've had a couple of really good conversations, one last night with Ms. Rhinewalt about their operation and how they're hoping that whole farm will work for them. I had a conversation with an apple grower in Michigan a couple of weeks ago who's been using whole farm and is very pleased with how it works for his operation. He's primarily a wholesale seller of his crop, and so that's a little different situation. I think anytime we talk about crop insurance, we have to talk about all of the pieces, and with the industry, we talk about the three-legged stool with RMA and the AIPs and with agents, and we have to remember all of the different layers that are involved there and make sure it's a good fit for everyone. We've not had an inflation adjustment for the A&O payments that are made to the AIPs for nearly 10 years, and that's something that I think would help our industry as a whole. Something else that I think would bear consideration is specialty crops fall in the same category with corn, soybeans, wheat, the main commodity crops, and so they're subject to the pro rata reduction in payments. And so we've seen that firsthand in our agency, being heavily in burley tobacco, and our revenue from our tobacco policies has been reduced by 40% because of the pro rata factor on corn and soybeans. It works perfectly for those crops, but when we're not aligned with the same increase in market value, increase in insured value and premiums, then it makes it difficult for agencies that focus on those extra crops.
Very good. Senator Klobuchar.
Very good, thank you. I appreciate a number of you raising the workforce issue, and I noted you, Mr. Etcheverry, talking about how important that's going to be. Senator Bennett is an expert on this and actually has a really good bill that I've co-sponsored on immigration reform for ag workers, so he'll ask those questions. But I wanted to lead with the funding for the marketing assistance for specialty crop program. The program, as you know, recognizes the struggles that specialty crop growers have with import pressures, rising costs, inadequate safety net. And I know USDA has made the initial payments, but eligible growers are still waiting for the rest of the assistance. This is for you, Director Boring. And they have received a partial payment, and this includes crop growers in Minnesota. We are pushing for the department to make good on the promise that was made. What response have you gotten from specialty crop growers in your state regarding this program from the USDA?
Well, thank you for the question. We've seen tremendous interest for the program, especially crop growers in Michigan. I know FSA office has seen quite a bit of interest. I believe there's been over 1,000 applications that have gone in for that program. My understanding is around half the money perhaps has gone out to specialty crop producers. You know, it's a really important lifeline for producers of diversifying market access and the ability to move products into different areas. And you mentioned some of these challenges around international pressures coming in. We certainly see that through a variety of different specialty crops in Michigan, right? Similar to what we see across the country here. Expanding out the domestic markets is going to be really critical.
Yep.
And strengthening some of these linkages between, like, Michigan
And-
farmers grow food and
I
it
know.
needs to be on tables.
I would figure research is also really important. That's something we do big time at the University of Minnesota, soil health, those kinds of things is also important. Is that right?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. And then risk management tools. Again, Mr. Etcheverry was noticing that the crop insurance provisions haven't been updated since the 1980s. You know, when Cabbage Patch dolls were popular, Walkmans were the rage, and the women, I think Senator Smith and I may remember this, were wearing little bow ties with their suits. So are you saying it might be time to update things since then?
Certainly timely.
Okay, good. Mr. Erickson, could you talk about how specialty crops growers can benefit when more families are able to afford fruits and vegetables?
Thank you for the question, Senator. We grow medicine. Fruits and vegetables, they are Mother Nature's medicine. So anything and everything we can be doing to encourage increased consumption of fresh fruits and vegetables, I think is critical. Our nation is facing a health crisis, and we should be investing in and supporting programs that encourage the consumption of fruits and vegetables. On the other side, there's a lot of work that needs to be done to ensure that those of us who are sitting here and who are producers can remain in business and stay in business. It requires the need to be profitable to run our farms and operations. So, but investing in school nutrition programs and WIC programs and encouraging and requiring the consumption of fresh fruits and vegetables, I think, is critical.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Etcheverry, I can't help but just keep being drawn to your chili peppers and what's going on there in New Mexico. Could you just talk about what the specialty crop block grant, how important it is and how it has helped that industry and what it means beyond even the growers, right? The restaurants and just the tourism and things like that for your state?
It is critical for us, as we are a super specialty crop that we have a very local following.
Is that a term of law?
Fanatic. It's allowed us to penetrate other markets and other states and educate our consumers on how to prepare our peppers and enjoy them as well.
Thank you. And I'll yield the rest of my time back. Thanks.
Senator Hyde-Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I certainly appreciate the opportunity that you've called this meeting, and I want to thank all of our witnesses today. This is incredibly important for our country, and your part today is very, very helpful. My question is for Ms. Rhinewalt of Mississippi. A few weeks ago, we heard from the row crop folks and the producers in our state, and the outlook is very, very glim, and it goes without saying that farming is heading in a very dark direction. And I know that you guys have the specialty crop side of things, but your family happens to be involved in both, with the row crops and a 2,000-acre operation that includes sweet potatoes as well. Would you just generally describe for the committee what your challenges are and your various hardships from your family operations facing, from the high cost of input, the depressed prices, the red tape, the regulations? Can you just share with us your greatest challenges?
Sure. Thank you, Senator. We utilize row crops primarily on our farm for crop rotation with sweet potatoes. But unfortunately, the higher margins that we do experience on the specialty crop side are pretty much diminished on the row crop side due to high equipment costs primarily, and then also historically low crop prices that we're experiencing right now. But of particular note would be critically outdated reference prices. So the farm safety net is not triggering as quickly as it should to really provide the relief we need for people who use row crop farming as a supplement, but most especially those who their whole livelihood is dependent on that.
So the update, again, is so critically important. And in your testimony, you also referred to the H-2A, temporary agriculture workers, that are so important. And my takeaway is that this program is critical in helping American farmers fill employment gaps that other people just do not. They're unwilling to do that type of work, and it is terribly expensive in recent years and riddled with red tape, as we well know. Could you again shed some light on the challenges you faced with the H-2A workers, the programs, but most of all, how we need to improve it?
Yes, Senator, thank you for that opportunity. Outside of the 3,000 pages of regulation that we're struggling to keep up with, we really need reform in the areas of AWR, as I stated before. The AWR rate in our state is currently $14.83, which is 31% higher than it was 5 years ago. But in particular, that rate does not consider the housing cost that we have to pay, transportation, and administrative expense. So typically, that can bring the rate that we're actually paying. I would say a conservative estimate would be $4 to $5 additional more dollars per hour that we're paying. So that $14.83 now is leaning into $20, which for the cost of living in our state is quite expensive. We also need a path to year-round labor so that we don't experience gaps in production. A lot of farms like us, we're a grower and a packer, so the planting and harvest seasons have been critical for H-2A, but since our long-term domestic workforce that's worked in the pack house has kind of dwindled and there's not a new generation coming on, a lot of people in our shoes, we're able to kind of patch it together. Our whole family's on the pack line working, just trying to get through that 8 weeks until H-2A workers return. But I have friends who have to shut down their pack lines completely because they just don't have enough help to keep it going. And that really exposes them with their customer base. Their customers could move on to somebody else. They really just need to kind of fill in that gap there. So that's probably about it.
If we do not have these changes and the suggestions that this entire panel's making, can you just look 5 years out and tell me how you foresee your operation if this committee and this Congress does not do something immediately?
If we don't make changes within, I don't think it will take 5 years for us to get the answer to that question. It'll be far less. If we, certainly if we continue on the trajectory that we're currently on, it'll take far less than 5 years to put a vast majority of specialty crop producers out of business. They cannot afford. We are having to, that increase in labor wage rates in particular, we're having to eat all of that because for many of us, depending on what your specialty crop is, our markets will not bear us passing along that cost to our customers.
And I'm out of town. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for holding the hearing. I want to thank the ranking member for her mention of the workforce issues here, and I'm glad they're coming up everywhere. Mr. Etcheverry, I'm going to come to a question with you, but I will say, since you strike me as an honest man, and I know there are a lot of people from New Mexico and your family watching you today, I'm not going to ask you about the virtues of Pueblo, Chile today.
Thank you, I appreciate
You're
that.
most welcome, but we can talk about it later. Every single one of these, in fact, Anna said that the future of the American farm is at stake. I agree with that. And I think when I transport myself back to another time, not that long ago in American history, just about 10 years ago, we had an agreement, the Gang of Eight bill on immigration that had tens of billions of dollars of border security. I think it was like 70 billion in current dollars. It had a pathway to citizenship for the 11 million people that are here that are undocumented. It had agriculture provisions that I negotiated with Senator Rubio and Senator Hatch and with Senator Feinstein. Two of those people have passed from this earth, but it was supported, the agriculture provisions of that bill were supported by the growers all over America and were supported by the farm workers, which is how it should be because of what Mr. Erickson said, the importance of the food that they're growing to the lifeblood of this nation. You know, the growers and the farm workers are doing something that most of us would never be able to do, most of us could never do. And they are an essential part of not just our economy, but our culture, who we are as the American people. And it's a reminder that of how, in my opinion, how impoverished our discussion on immigration has become in this country. Not because we shouldn't secure the border. I'm for that. I was for that long before Donald Trump rode his escalator down at Trump Tower. And we're never going to get a plan together that doesn't do all of the things that we tried to do in the Gang of Eight bill. In 2022, you know, we had a bipartisan proposal. It's similar to the one that's in the House that was described, that actually had a wage freeze and dealt with the adverse wage issues, that was agreed to by the farm workers and also by almost all the growers in America, but not by all the growers in America. So what I would say is we need your help, you know, before we lose American agriculture, before we lose farms and ranches that are just going to move to places where they can find the labor they need to be able to do what we used to do here and are in danger of not being able to do anymore. And I wonder, Mr. Etcheverry, in all of that context, and I apologize for the long windup, but I do think it is important to recognize that there was a time when our politics was not as broken as it is around this issue. And I guess also a reminder that this economy, especially our rural farm economy, depends on immigration and our having a functional immigration system in this country. Mr. Etcheverry, could you talk a little bit about how things have gotten more dire in the last few years on this subject? And then if there's anybody else who'd like to comment, I'm happy to take that too.
It's become more dire with all of the comments from this board. We're seeing higher interest rates, lower farmer wages. One of my growers did the math on his take home, and he makes $3 an hour. And it's just hard. It's just really hard.
Anna, do you want to talk? I'm sorry, Ben, are you done? Yeah.
No, sir.
Go
We have
ahead.
a lot of on-farm workers close to the border who want to be good Americans. They want to come over, they want to work, they pay their taxes, and they go home and they raise their families.
I remember Jeff Flake was part of that negotiation as well, and he learned this on his farm, on his family's farm and ranch in Arizona. Anna, do you want to say anything else, or?
We're a little bit farther north than Mr. Etcheverry, so I don't have a whole lot of experience. We transitioned directly from domestic workforce into the H-2A program.
Well, you talked about the need for year-round folks, didn't you?
Yes.
Could you talk a little bit about that?
There are a tremendous number of constituents right now who have never even had access to the H-2A program because their operations, we have different segments of our operations. Some are seasonal and they're easy to enter into the H-2A program quickly, but their operations are specifically year-round. And so they have not even been able, they're suffering without a reliable workforce, and they've not been able to take advantage of the H-2A program at all due to the seasonality restrictions.
Thank you for that. And with my last 2 seconds, I'd say to the chairman and the ranking member, you know, as somebody on this panel said already, this isn't in the jurisdiction of this committee, and that's true. But I think that Republicans and Democrats here could provide some leadership to the rest of the Senate in terms of bringing these proposals forward, and I just want to volunteer my services in your efforts to do that.
Senator Tuberville.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for you being here today, all of you. Our ag economy is a disaster, complete disaster. You know, if we don't do something, and I don't know how it's going to work, we're not going to have an ag committee here in a few years. We lost 150,000 farms in the last few years, 150,000 farms. And if that's not a disaster, I don't know what is. But we don't help you at all. Regulations are overboard. Labor is out of sight. You have no water. I don't know what we've done right up here. Doesn't sound like a whole lot. But Mr. Rhinewalt, what's the ideal rate if we were to revert back to labor cost? What would be the ideal rate that we would pay if you to make a profit?
Senator, thank you. We actually had that discussion yesterday. we chuckled talking about wages that were based on maybe 115% of the federal wage rate or state minimum wage rates, but we know that's at $7.25, and farmers are not suggesting that we pay that low. But we do want to have some consideration, a formulation for the wage rate that takes into account that $14.83 may be the wage rate, but we need to consider the transportation cost, the administrative cost, the housing cost, and maybe prorate that in consideration of those factors, because it's a fallacy to say that because we're paying $14.83, that's not really the wage rate we're paying. It's really more like $20 or $21 an hour.
Exactly. Thank you, Mr. Erickson. $23 an hour, you got to be kidding me. How do you make it? I mean, what would be your cost to make a profit?
Well, I wish it wasn't. It is. And to Ms. Reinhardt's comments, all the costs that are involved with applying for the program, transporting the laborers from their home country to the United States where they're going to work. We transport them. We put them in housing, hotels, transport them from the hotel to the job site. They have catering services. We provide food. You need to take them to doctor's appointments and to get sundries and such. I don't know, how you roll back. And in Texas, the AWR is, I believe it's $15.87 an hour. Our actual cost is about $23 per hour when you add all that in. I don't know what the number is. We definitely need to put a cap on the increases that have occurred. How do we deal with it? Unfortunately, in the case of Little Bear Produce, I wish Senator Lujan was still here. We recently shut down. We had a onion packing facility in Deming, New Mexico. It was an important part of our operation. That had about 15 full-time people, and we brought in 20 to 30 seasonal people. We ran onions, hatch chilies, pumpkins, watermelons up there, and we had to recently shutter that facility in part because of the water that's being withheld in Mexico, and they're using that water to grow our crops, and then we're having to purchase those products. It is a crazy situation for us to be in. And as a business, we had to make the decision, and you have to sit down with each one of these. These people have been working for us for 12 or 15 years, and to sit down and tell them, we have to let you go. Unfortunately, we're going to work with you to try to transition into another job. And you know what? The craziest thing was, those folks, in talking to them, they were so thankful for the opportunity that they had during the 12 or 15 years that they were working for us, and they were so thankful for that. But if we don't get these costs under control for U.S. producers, we are going to continue to hand over the production of specialty crops and fruits and vegetables.
We're not going to have it. It's going to be over. Ms. Rhinewalt, could we do without an H-2A program?
No, sir. We would be completely out of business.
What about how are domestic workers being affected by H-2A program?
Well, a domestic workforce is never again going to be the remedy for ag production in the United States per their response to the job. So 97% of jobs remain open when we're required to advertise them to domestic workers first before we can receive any assurance that we're allowed to bring H-2A onto our farms. We would be happy to pay our own citizens a very reasonable wage and save all those auxiliary costs that I mentioned, but they simply do not want the jobs.
Thank you. Good luck. Hope we get out of your way.
Thank you.
Because that's what we're going to have to do. Thank you.
Senator Smith.
Well, thank you, Chair Bozeman. Thank you very much for this hearing, and welcome to all of our panelists. I want to particularly give a welcome to Lori and to John from Minnesota for your work. We're blessed, Mr. Chair, to have Minnesotans lead both national pork and national turkey, and I think it's a tribute to the diverse farm economy that we have in Minnesota. So I want to welcome you both here. I also just want to associate myself with the comments that Senator Bennett made and the great insights from our panel on the issues around farm labor reforms, which I think it's just so important for us all to hear. It doesn't work for us sitting up here to say, somebody should do something about all the problems when we really are the ones that need to put aside our partisan differences and figure it out. Mr. Etcheverry, I'm a proud senator of Minnesota, but I was born in New Mexico. And so for me, chili is not a specialty crop, it's a necessary crop. And I really appreciate also the comments that we've had around the importance for bipartisan risk management tools that work for specialty farmers. I appreciated your question on this, Senator Bozeman and others. And we keep hearing that I think we don't pay enough attention to how crop insurance just doesn't work like it should for many farmers, especially small farmers and specialty farmers. And the whole farm revenue protection option was designed to fill some of those gaps, but it's got shortcomings. So I've been working on some legislation to address these shortcomings. Many of the challenges that you've raised, our bill goes at trying to work on. And so I'd like to continue this conversation and get feedback from all of you on that legislation. I'd love to see that be a part of the work that we do in the upcoming Farm Bill. Mr. Chair, I'd like to enter into the record a letter from the Minnesota Farmers Union opposing staffing cuts at local and regional USDA offices.
Without objection.
This letter says, and I quote, "We want a USDA that is effective, responsive, and accountable to the farmers and communities that they serve. This requires adequate staffing and stable funding." I bet you all are seeing this in your states. We're seeing it in Minnesota. USDA county and local offices, they help farmers in so many different ways, managing disease outbreaks, safety net programs. They're partners with farmers, dealing with all of the challenges that you've been describing. And yet, despite the critical work that they're doing, many of these positions in local offices have been eliminated over the last few weeks. Just yesterday, I was hearing from a Minnesotan about local USDA employees who were almost through their probationary period to replace soon-to-be retiring FSA staff, only to get fired after all that training. And they're worried, of course, that those folks are going to retire anyway, that those new probationary employees were going to be filling the spots of. And you have to remember that these FSA employees or NRCS employees are often farmers themselves who are trying to find extra farm income because of all the challenges that you all have laid out. So I want to just talk for a minute about these, the importance of this regional local staff, USDA staff. Mr. Boring, I'm going to ask you about this. Can you just talk about the impacts of firing these USDA employees and how these local FSA offices are helping farmers and what it means if they're just not there?
Well, I think it's a great question, great point to bring up. As a former state executive director in Michigan of FSA, I know firsthand of how dedicated certainly Midwest and Michigan FSA employees are to farmer partnerships and working closely, providing that assistance. We talked a little bit about today of some of the challenges of these programs. A lot of the services that are available to growers are complicated, and there's a lot of nuance to these programs. FSA staff help growers navigate these issues, right?
They're partners, really.
Partners, and I think that's true in so much of the work that we're working to foster in agriculture.
Mm-hmm.
It's true of the crop insurance agents that are partners with farmers out there. It's true of how we're advancing conservation practices,
Mm-hmm.
implementing different land management approaches that requires technical expertise. The partnerships broadly here is really essential to working with farmers and to building stronger, more resilient farming systems.
I think that's absolutely right. And I hear so often from Minnesota farmers about how they rely on FSA advice and develop long-term relationships with folks. And that's all going out the window with these firings. Mr. Chair, I know that we've worked in a bipartisan way to try to address some of the staffing shortages that we've seen in FSA, and yet what the administration is doing right now goes absolutely counter to, I think, what is a shared bipartisan goal here. So I hope that we can find a solution that will make sure that farmers across the country have the support that they need from FSA and other regional offices. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Smith. Senator Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me just tell you just this. I don't have a script to go by. I'm a new kid on the block in a lot of ways. But I promise you that I really think you should listen to what I have to say today. In many ways, I would say, what should we do? What should we do? And there is a solution to all this. My dad would have said a long time ago, and if I can use the slang that he would use, he would say, son, I don't know exactly what we should do, but this, and he would not say, dadgum, he would say, this, whatever, surely ain't it. And I would tell you all just exactly just this. I really appreciate those coming today and their testimony. I really appreciate our chairman and our ranking member, but we have the real deal chairman right now. And we can really make a difference. Let me just take you through some level of math. The small family farm in America today, the average size is 430 plus acres. Now just think about this just for a second. They're hurting in every way imaginable. And we better awaken real quickly to just a couple of things. We go into grocery stores and as far as you can see, a mile long, there's every choice imaginable. We pay almost nothing of our annual incomes compared to countries all across this globe to have a luxury like you can't imagine that we have in America. That's all there is to it. We have that luxury because of these people, because of many of you that are sitting right out here right now. Absolutely, when it comes right down to it, our family farms in this country do something that defies all financial reasonableness. That's all there is to it. Just let me walk you through just a little bit of math. If you had 500 acres today in Champaign, Illinois, it's probably worth greater than $15,000 an acre. With all that being said, if you just do the math real quick and everything, that's $7.5 million. If that farmer had $500,000 in the bank, he had $8 million worth of worth. And really and truly what he does is he goes out and pushes it all out on the table every year and says, I'm all in. I'm waiting on it to rain, and absolutely that farmer probably is living off of $28,000 or $42,000 a year, when if he sold his land tomorrow, he could absolutely go to Goldman Sachs, and Goldman Sachs would bring him a return of probably $350,000 a year. But he doesn't do it. He doesn't do it for all of us. For every last one of us, he doesn't do it. And the reason he doesn't do it is because he loves what he's doing. And we better love him. That's all there is to it. At the end of the day, if we don't love him enough, we're going to be in real trouble. Now, what happens? What happens tomorrow if big, giant corporations, Exxon, whatever it may be, all get together and decide, I'll tell you what we're going to do. This guy's not going to continue to farm. He's not going to continue to do what he does. And so he decides he wants to go to the Bahamas and hang out and absolutely have somebody send him an annual income of $350,000 instead of his $28,000 and driving a 12-year-old pickup truck. What do we do if we lose him? And absolutely whatever it may be, a foreign interest, Exxon, whatever, decides just out of the clear blue sky that what they're going to do is they're going to plant one crop and then they're going to say the price of corn is $150 a bushel, and if you don't want it, we're not going to plant anymore. What happens to us? We have a meltdown in our food industry. We have a meltdown in a crisis in this country like you can't imagine. We owe so much to those people, it's off the chart. Coach Tuberfield is a great friend. We're both coaches in our own way. With all that being said, I absolutely promise you to God above, we've got to fix this. We've got to fix this right now. We've got to fix crop insurance. We have got to have a farm bill that is a true bill that basically probably is regionalized. Instead of a one size fits all, it doesn't fit all. That's all there is to it. I've grown many specialty crops, and I salute you for what you do. It's a high-risk business. You're fighting everything from regulations to labor and on and on and on. We all are. But we got to wake up. Absolutely. If we don't wake up right now, and we awaken to those farmers leaving the farm for whatever reason it may be, it's going to be a bad day in America. Mr. Chairman, I salute you in every way, and absolutely I thank all of y'all that are involved in agriculture and especially this committee. Thank you so much for your testimony and everything, and so God bless America in every way, and we got to fix it, and we better fix it now. We're going to be in a heck of a mess. Thank y'all so much.
Thank you, Senator Justice, and again, very well said. Senator Booker.
Mr. Chairman, just a point of privilege. Forgive me for my language, but I just want to say, damn, I was not a coach. I was a player in the once great Pac-10 that is no more. But if you're the coach and you talk like that, put me in, coach, because I'm ready to play in a bipartisan way to deal with this. Because this panel, I was sitting there listening, and the nobility of what you all stand for and what you all do, and the unnecessary crap that you have to deal with that undermines your ability to do what is the greatest profession that helped found this nation, which is to farm, to feed communities. It's evident, and we have to fix this stuff. And there are common sense ways that I've been talking about for a long time. Agriculture is the fourth biggest industry in my state, and we are a so-called specialty crop state. And this one-size-fits-all doesn't work. It really doesn't work. We are a nation that spends 93% of our ag subsidies on the big commodity crops and does not support so-called specialty crops in the way we do, nor do we do common sense things, limiting regulations, supporting labor to help them out. So this was really, really, to me, exciting to hear, Brother Justice, I'm coming for you. That's not a threat, that is a compliment for us to work together. But I just want to take my few moments, if you all don't mind. We're going to work on these issues, and I will champion them. But I just want to say a lot of my farmers in New Jersey and across the country are just struggling right now with an immediate crisis, which is the illegal funding freeze that has been imposed on thousands of USDA contracts. I'm getting calls and emails from farmers all across my state, from all different political perspectives, that are just saying, why are we investing money on farms for things like planting cover crops or installing irrigation systems, but now those farmers are not receiving their reimbursements. They've outlaid cash, and they're now in a crisis. For many farmers, this is tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of dollars that the USDA is now stiffing them on. And for some of these farmers, they're saying that if they're not able to move forward with their spring planting and are ultimately at risk for losing their farms in foreclosure, because of what the USDA is doing to them, it will be catastrophic. These reimbursement payments and signed contracts with farmers that have been frozen, this is wrong. The USDA has also frozen their reimbursements to nonprofits and small businesses who provide critical assistance to farmers. In Jersey, we have nonprofits and small businesses who give this kind of technical assistance. They too are in crisis. There are also groups who help farmers implement conservation practices that we supported in a bipartisan way. And there are groups helping those farmers that are now facing this crisis. All of these nonprofits and small businesses have signed contracts with the USDA to provide these services. They've laid out money in reliance upon them, and now they're being, excuse my language, Mr. Chairman, they're being screwed. This is wrong. And it's hurting people, and it's a self-inflicted wound that's got to stop. It is killing me that we're now seeing people in my state, farmers that are laying off staff, that they're not getting the help they deserve, and they're not doing their innovations that are going to help them be better stewards of the land because they know how to supply the land. That's why a lot of these conservation programs have been so oversubscribed. It's outrageous and it's illegal. Multiple federal courts have instructed the administration to lift these bans lift these broad freezes, but the USDA is ignoring the court orders and intentionally causing serious harm to farmers across our country. On top of all that, the USDA has fired many of the local level staff who farmers rely upon and who would be helping the farmers to navigate this crisis. I know Secretary Rollins. I voted for Secretary Rollins. We need help. If the USDA does not immediately release the funding to our farmers, I hope this committee will quickly bring her back here to explain to us why. Every day that we wait, we're already in a farming crisis in this country. We're already losing thousands of independent family farmers. And this is outrageous. At a time that we have other issues we should be dealing with, we're right now dealing with this crisis. And I just want to say one more thing on another subject, because I know I'm not going to be here for the next panel, but I know Prop 12 is going to be brought up, and I just want to say my piece for 10, 20 seconds. I'm concerned that there is no witness here today to speak for the independent family farmers who support Prop 12. The National Pork Producer Council does not represent all of the hog farmers in the country. They may speak for the big producers. They may align with the biggest multinational corporations, but they do not represent our smaller independent hog farmers. In fact, a large group of those independent farmers filed a brief with the Supreme Court for Prop 12, arguing that Prop 12 helped them by creating new markets for their products and allowing them to better compete with the big vertically integrated meat packers like Smithfield. I didn't vote for Justice Gorsuch, but here is his brief. In his Supreme Court decision upholding Prop 12, Justice Gorsuch cited directly these independent hog farmers and cattle farmers in our country. I'd like to ask unanimous consent to enter the brief for these independent family farmers.
Without objection.
Mr. Chairman and Mr. Justice, if you want to know where I'm going to stand, it is for small, mid-sized, independent family farmers. You started your statement by talking about the average farm in our country. But these entrepreneurs, these folks have been devastated in the last decade. We're losing thousands of farmers. I've sat with them from the Midwest to around my state. This is a crisis being made worse right now by the USDA, but I'm hoping that we can work together to solve some of these problems. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Welch.
Thank you very much. Before I start, I do hope the committee, Mr. Justice, or Senator Justice, I really appreciated your remarks, and I think all of us feel pretty much the same way. The farmers are the lifeblood of our local rural communities, and nobody works harder, maybe the coal miners in West Virginia, but they're right up there, the farmers and the coal miners. And I'm just shocked that where there have been agreements made, and we have farmers in Vermont who, under the IRA, made an agreement, and in response to that agreement, borrowed money, and then did the work that they promised to do. It might be solar, it might be stream bed protection, and now got an email saying the federal government's going to stiff them. You know, what I so admire about farmers, like a promise made is a promise kept, right? I mean, this is like impossible for the folks who do this farming to imagine that you have an agreement and then it's violated. So my hope, Mr. Chairman, is that the committee would weigh in here and insist that these deals that have been signed and where our farmers now have put the money out, done the work, and are getting stiffed, that we really strongly object and call on the administration to reverse that. I just want to ask some questions about specialty crops. You know, we have so much of our farm program is on commodities, dairy included, but the specialty crops, it's a funny name for me because it's like everything local, everything fresh, and everything nutritious. And my view is we need more, not less, of the specialty crops. A lot of our specialty crop farmers got really hurt by the floods we had in July of 23 and July of 24, and our crop insurance program really needs to be improved. You know, maple syrup is one, which I'd like to talk about. And with Senator Collins from Maine, I've endorsed we've sponsored and introduced the Supporting All Producers, the SAP Act. What that does is helps the sustainability of that program. Another program another bill that we've introduced together, making agricultural products locally essential, the Maple Act. I want to ask Mr. Boring, we've talked a lot about maple syrup, but the climate-related disturbances are not unique to maple. It's affecting all kinds of crops. And my question is, what can we do to provide specialty crop growers the support they need to ensure the continuation of their family farms with all the changes in weather?
Well, I think that's an excellent question. Certainly, we enjoy maple syrup in Michigan as well. We're coming into the season for that. Looking forward to that. I think we need more certainty for specialty crop growers. I think so much of the questions that issues we're talking about today come down to providing more certainty for producers. And in some ways, better valuing the impacts of what these crops are, not only for farms, but for the rural economies that process so many of them, the communities that they feed. We've touched on some points around, revisions to crop insurance, certainly. We need better management tools so that we can deal with increasingly extreme and erratic weather. I think there's promise about looking at how we broaden out conservation practices and
Let me
the
go on
impact on
with
resiliency
another
there.
question. I mean, I think we have to have more emphasis on them because the real opportunity is it's local, it's nutritious. The people in the communities really support it, and it's an entry point for some younger farmers that doesn't have as many financial barriers. Just as an example, Mr. Chairman, the USDA has a specialty crop block grant program. In Vermont, received $334,000. That's not a lot of money in the scheme of things, but it did a lot in Vermont. With a $56,000 grant, one USDA recipient in Vermont was able to expand the market opportunities for 60 local farmers. And a lot of this is like the farm stand type of situation. This is tiny compared to the $6.3 billion that we spend on the commodity crop program. It's important, I know, to you, but the specialty is really important as well. So tell me, how is the federal funding, and Mr. Boring, freeze affected our specialty crop growers?
It creates uncertainty. And I think that's the biggest question of what those risk mitigation tools are going to be into the future, of the reliability and access to markets when crops might be harvested later this fall. There's uncertainty on the research front as researchers are working on this. So in essence, uncertainty.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you. Senator Lujan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Chairman, as I begin, I'd like to ask that written testimony from Gene Baca of Bueno Foods, that his remarks be submitted into the record.
Without objection.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Baca is a 14th generation New Mexican, founder and former president of the New Mexico Chile Association, and a leader in New Mexico's food and agricultural industry. Now, the strength of our country and our agricultural industry, I believe, is its diversity. That's a word that I use a lot. It's a good word. It talks about our crops. Diversity in crops is good. The success, Mr. Hinton, that you described with the varieties and the diversity you have of crops help you prosper and connect with more folks, whether it's domestically or internationally. And I applaud you for that as well. The diversity of our growers and the products they raise and grow help make us stronger as a nation. We need more producers in America, not fewer producers. We need more generations. Well, I can't brag that I'm 8th generation farming, sir. I'm 4th generation in the family house that I live in today and the little farm that I still call home. And God willing, it will be in the family for generations after us. But the power of finding more farmers, encouraging younger generations to get involved and stay involved is so critically important. I've spoken many times in this committee about how the Farm Bill can and should do more to support the diverse farms and ranches across our great country. I look forward to working on some bipartisan initiatives where we provide support farmer to farmer. There's a lot of programs out there that provide support to farmers, but if you're a farmer and you're giving your time to another farmer to teach them how to farm and qualify for these USDA programs, you don't get compensated a penny out of the generosity of your heart because you care about the industry. Well, there should be a support program for that so we can tap into the genius of existing farmers and producers across the country and learn from them how best to do what you do. I look forward to continuing this work, and as I said, it's bipartisan. Now, Mr. Etcheverry, in your testimony, you mentioned the frustrations that New Mexico growers have with crop insurance and your desire to see it expand. What challenges do you see specialty crop growers facing when looking at the risk management tools currently available to them?
Sir, bureaucracy. We want the insurance, and there is minimal insurance, and we asked USDA to be able to get more insurance, and we were basically told, okay, go collect the data yourself, and then we'll take a look at the data you collect. we're all working full-time jobs. The average on-farm time for a grower is 18 hours a day. For him to stop and do the job that the USDA should do is hard enough.
I appreciate that, Mr. Etcheverry. And Mr. Chairman, as I've learned from smaller producers across the country, there are offerings on paper, but they don't work once folks try to get them to use them. I often compare it to when we talk about water rights in the West, we like wet water. We don't just like water on paper. And everyone's chuckling here because you know what I'm talking about. It's the same vein in this space. You shouldn't just get a piece of paper that says you bought the policy. It's got to work for these folks, and I look forward to working with you on that and the ranking member. Now, Ben, I want to maybe get something from you for the official record so that you have some thought to put into this, but specifically, what should Congress do to expand access to risk management programs for specialty crop growers? And I'd invite all of you to help us understand how to cut through that bureaucracy as well, and then make sure that that policy is actually applicable to what you're doing on the ground and helping folks. There's a farmer from New Mexico that testified to this committee not long ago, and he taught me that he had to learn how to farm USDA. I said, what do you mean by that, Mr. Bustos? He said, if I don't farm USDA, I don't get access to any of these programs, so I had to change the way that I was planting, change the way that I was going after programs. And that thought has stuck with me for years at a time because it shouldn't be that case. You're there to produce food, to nurture that land, to make sure that you're selling those crops. You don't need to be going through all these other steps. So I hope that we can get that better as well. Mr. Chairman, I have a slew of other questions, but I've gone on and on my own. So I'm just going to submit them into the record to each and every one of you. Mr. Etcheverry, I can't thank you enough for taking time to travel from home to come out here. I mean this truly because you're in the midst of a lot of important decisions that are taking place as we speak. But it means a lot to the people back home that you're here. And I hope that the rest of the country just falls in love with Chile as much as we love it as well. So thanks again.
Thank you all very much for being here. We appreciate it. Let's swap panels real quick. And again, thank you all so much. Your testimony was great.
Thank you.
Very, very helpful.
Really good.
Really
And
good.
I am going to go to New Mexico and have these chilies. That's my plan.
We want the Lujan chili.
Okay, if everyone wants to sit down so we can get started. All right, thank you. Chairman Bozeman had to go vote, so he has given me the gavel, so who knows what's going to happen. But I am pleased to introduce this second panel. And if we could all sit down, thank you. There we go. That first panel couldn't have gone better. As you can see, we have a lot of interested members and a lot of bipartisan support for a lot of the ideas we're talking about. So our second panel. First of all, we have Mr. Ben Lehfeldt, and he serves as president of the American Sheep Industry Association. a fifth-generation sheep rancher from Montana. Mr. Lehfeldt's family has been involved in the sheep industry for 140 years. He also serves as president of his county farm bureau, serves on his county FSA committee, and is chairman of his local school board. And I look forward to hearing about your perspectives on the sheep industry. We are also joined by Mr. Buck Wehrbein. Thank you very much. And I know that Senator Fisher wanted to be here to welcome you. She said great things about you. But I will introduce you for now. You are from Waterloo, Nebraska. Is that right? And you serve as president of the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. I think Senator Fisher knows a little bit about cattle. Mr. Wehrbein brings over 45 years of experience from the cattle feeding sector across both Texas and Nebraska, and has served in various leadership posts in the beef industry. Thank you for being here today. It's also an important industry in my state. We are also joined by Mr. Harold Howrigan, and Senator Welch is here to introduce Mr. Howrigan.
Thank you very much. Mr. Howrigan is here from the dairy capital of the United States of America, Sheldon, Vermont. And we are glad to have him. Harold and his wife, Bret, she's an elementary teacher, are the sixth generation on their family farm. Is that right? 6 generations. And he's got grandkids there right now doing the work while we're here. 4 adult children, 5 grandchildren. He's in business with his brothers, Lawrence and Michael, and his 3 sons, 3 nephews and their families. They've got 4 dairies, 350 cows on each. And I started out my political career on the Agriculture Committee in the state of Vermont in 1981. And your uncle, Harold, was my boss on the Agriculture Committee. And one time he gave me the highest compliment. He said, "You're a dairy guy." So I am delighted to have you here representing Vermont dairy. It's just wonderful, and we're going to see a great farmer. Thank you.
Very exciting. Thank you, Senator Welch. Now, Minnesota is the top turkey producing state in the nation. I don't know if you knew that, Senator Welch. Yes. As well as the second top pork producer in the U.S. And we're fortunate to have 2 outstanding Minnesota witnesses, and Senator Smith and I welcome both of you. First of all, Lori Stevermer of Easton, Minnesota. Lori currently serves as the president of the National Pork Producers Council's Executive Board. She is the Customer Success Manager for Alltech's U.S. pork business, having spent her time in sales and marketing in the animal nutrition business for over 30 years. I often see her at the Minnesota State Fair at the pork booth, and there with a little oink oink hat. We welcome you, Senator Welch. I know you want to wear one of those. And Lori is a graduate of the University of Minnesota with a bachelor's degree in animal science. John Zimmerman is also with us, and John is the chairman of the National Turkey Federation. John is a 35-year veteran of the turkey industry and a proud second-generation turkey farmer who also raises corn and soybeans, so it gives him a unique view of all of this, being diversified that way. He does that on his family farm with his wife, Kara, and their son, Grant. I've known John for several years, and I remember when avian flu hit and just the emotion of so many of yours and your producers during that time. And I know you're going to provide an incredibly valuable perspective to this committee today. We also have with us Tony Wesner from Seymour, Indiana, on behalf of the United Egg Producers. Mr. Wesner serves as CEO of Rose Acre Farms, the second largest egg producer in the nation. He has served in various roles with Rose Acre Farms over the past 30 years, and given everything that's going on, there's a lot of discussion about eggs right now and what's happening with avian flu and prices, and I really look forward to your testimony on the challenges that our egg producers currently face. So thank you for being here today. Thank you for being here today, Mr. Wesner. So now we're going to start with you, Ben. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you very much, Chairman Bozeman, Ranking Member, Senators. Thank you for inviting me today. My fellow sheep ranchers and the entire industry appreciate the opportunity to share our federal policy priorities. The Farm Bill specifically and 2025 in general will be key for the survival of our industry, given the impacts from federal regulations, taxes, federal programs, and trade on my fellow producers. As the oldest livestock trade association in the country, we are a key component to America's future. From the land we have cherished and protected for generations, to the uniforms worn by our American warriors, and the high-quality American lamb that has fed them and their fellow Americans for centuries, we are proud and a key piece of that American story. Sheep producers are dealing with record high input costs and depressed or flat markets for lamb and wool. The wholesale lamb market has been stagnant for the past year, and any uptick is quickly dampened by a surge of imports of Australia and New Zealand lamb. In fact, 2024 saw portions of those imports increase by 1/3 over 2023. ASI's producers are looking for solutions to help curb the influx of those imported lamb that seems to continually floor our market. Thanks to the chairman's encouragement, last year, USDA's Risk Management Agency issued a report assessing the risk management tools currently available to the sheep industry, or lack thereof. The report acknowledged our need for a quality risk management tool, but ultimately did not provide recommendations. We therefore ask that you direct the Secretary to provide recommendations for a viable sheep-specific risk management tool. A large share of our 2024 wool clip did not receive a bid, and yet we are now sharing the 2025 clip. The 2018 trade war with China blew up our single largest market for American wool. This loss was followed by a pandemic that wiped out demand for most wool garments. A lack of demand easily seen in our overflowing wool warehouses, and something well known and used by our buyers' purchasing decisions. We asked the committee to update the wool marketing loan rate that, unlike other commodities, has not been updated since 2002. We strongly support the 2024 House Bill's proposal and appreciate your mirroring of that effort. In addition, we ask your strong support in ensuring that the administration includes wool in any future market equalization payments to help rectify a longstanding trade imbalance. Free trade only works if it's fair trade. 1/3 of our America's sheep herd is under the watch of an H-2A sheep herder. Our labor costs have skyrocketed over the past 8 years. Salary alone in California, the second largest sheep producing state, is nearly $58,000 annually per herder. This, combined with the mandate that we provide the herders with food, board and clothing, while also covering their application and visa fees, has driven our costs to an untenable level. California has lost nearly 15% of sheep production over the last 2 years alone. Our survival is literally reliant on a modernized sheep herder guest worker program. In closing, we support the FMD and MAP programs, the reauthorization of the livestock mandatory price reporting, the enhancement of conservation and technical assistance tools, and the vital funding from our Farm Bill's orphan programs. I pledge ASI's full support for your efforts to secure our priority requests in the 2025 Farm Bill. Enactment of a Farm Bill is crucially important to the thousands of sheep operations across the country. Thank you for your efforts to continue American agriculture's uniquely important role in feeding, fueling, and clothing the world. We are proud to be a part of it. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And we've now been joined by Senator Fisher, who is off voting, and I know she wants to say a few more words about you, Mr. Buck Wehrbein, who's probably the best name ever for a cattle rancher we could have. So go ahead.
Thank you, Senator Klobuchar, and thank you to all the witnesses for being here today. Nebraska's the beef state, and so I am very, very happy today to have Mr. Buck Wehrbein here as a witness. In May of 2023, when Chairman Bozeman visited Nebraska on his Farm Bill tour, we were able to visit Buck's feedlot and hear directly from him about how the Farm Bill could support cattle producers. Mr. Wehrbein grew up in eastern Nebraska on a farm raising cattle, hogs, and chickens. He's managed custom feedlots in Nebraska and in Texas, we'll forgive him that, since 1984, while feeding his own cattle since 1980. He's been active in the beef industry, and he has served as both chairman and treasurer for the Nebraska Beef Council and served on the Beef Promotion Operating Committee. He currently serves as president of the National Cattlemen Beef Association. Buck and his wife have been married 50 years. He has 3 children, 7 grandchildren, and 10 great-grandchildren. How is that possible, Buck? I am very, very proud to have you here today, Buck, representing Nebraska, and I look forward to hearing your testimony. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Senator Fisher. Mr. Wehrbein.
Chairman Bozeman, Ranking Member Klobuchar, and members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me to testify before you today on the state of the cattle business. My name is Buck Wehrbein. I am currently serving as president of the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, the oldest and largest organization representing cattle producers in America. Through NCBA's century-old grassroots policy process, our members direct us to advocate their interests here in the nation's capital. It is on behalf of these family seed stock, cow-calf, stocker, and feeding operations that I appear before you today. Overall, I am pleased to report that the state of the cattle industry is strong. Strong cattle prices and beef demand have made the marketing environment for cattle better than virtually any time in the last 5 years. It is worth noting that these market improvements have occurred without any new legislation or regulation aimed at the cattle markets. While we have reason for optimism, like everyone else in agriculture, cattlemen and cattlewomen still face challenges, particularly with input costs that seem to never stop rising. Unfortunately, the rising costs of feed, fuel, animal health products, and other essentials still pose the greatest threat to producer profitability. We are hopeful Congress and the new Trump administration can swiftly adopt policies which will curb these inflationary pressures and deliver critical relief to cattle producers. As you look for ideas on how to accomplish this, I would draw your attention to the following key issues. A significant portion of cattle producers' input costs result from compliance with arduous federal regulations. Whether adhering to Agenda-Driven Endangered Species Act and National Environmental Policy Act requirements, or navigating miles of bureaucratic red tape to access farm programs, the outsized impact of federal rules cuts into producers' pockets. While we are grateful that some of the most atrocious proposed regulations, like the Biden administration's attempts to rewrite the Packers and Stockyards Act, have been abandoned, more oversight is needed to ensure similarly harmful rules never finalize. In a post-Chevron deference world and with a renewed eye on government efficiency, we are hopeful that common sense will be inserted into the rulemaking process. Producer profitability is always at the forefront of NCBA's priority, and right-sizing the federal government is the smartest way to begin addressing that issue. One of the most effective tools designed to put dollars back into the pockets of farmers and ranchers is the beef checkoff. This immensely popular program has come under fire from the radical animal rights industry and the fake farm groups they bankroll. The truth is, the beef checkoff works for producers, and it does all this with the pooled resources of cattle producers across the country at zero cost to the taxpayer. The beef checkoff is the model public-private partnership, and NCBA urges Congress to reject measures aimed at dismantling it. NCBA also urges the House and Senate to swiftly adopt a farm bill. We have supported and continue to support Chairman Thompson's bipartisan legislation in your framework, Mr. Chairman. There are many other important issues which I do not have time to address in my opening statement, and I direct your attention to my written testimony for more detail. In closing, Mr. Chairman, NCBA is ready to work alongside this committee, this administration, and anyone else to ensure the future of the cattle industry remains strong. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to answering your question.
Thank you very much. Next up, Mr. Howrigan.
Chairman Bozeman, Ranking Member Klobuchar, Thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Harold Horrigan. My wife, Bret, and I are sixth generation on our family farm in Vermont. I am honored to serve on the board of both Dairy Farmers of America and National Milk Producers Federation, which Dairy Farmers of America is a member. I'm pleased to speak today on the dairy industry. We appreciate all the steps you have taken toward completing a farm bill, and we urge this committee to prioritize timely passage of a new 5-year bill to provide certainty to our industry. The Dairy Margin Coverage Program has served farmers well during difficult times. Since it was implemented 6 years ago, our farm has consistently purchased the maximum $9.50 coverage, knowing it is meant to be a safety net when needed. We urge this committee to continue the program and update its production history calculation to reflect more recent on-farm production levels. I thank you, Chairman Bozeman and Ranking Member Klobuchar, for your support for this update. We are also pleased that USDA has finalized its federal milk marketing order modernization decision, but we need this committee's help on one piece. The dairy industry lacks accurate, transparent data on dairy product processing costs. We thank members of this committee for supporting language to require USDA to conduct mandatory processing cost studies every 2 years. This will give us all better data, and we can hope to work with you in the future to get this done. I will touch on just a few more topics today. First, ag labor reform. We continue to face an acute shortage of workers. Dairy farmers consistently try to hire domestic workers, but ultimately rely on immigrant workers to make sure we can produce our milk. We strongly urge Congress to enact long overdue legislation to provide permanent certainty for our current workers and their families, and to open the H-2A program to dairy. Failing to act risks damaging the vitality of our entire sector. Second, trade. Nearly 1/5 of U.S. dairy production is exported, and this share is only likely to rise. We must seek new market access so we don't continue to slip behind our competitors. We urge doubling the funding for trade promotion programs, which boosts the presence of American dairy worldwide. We also urge Congress to help resolve trade issues with Canada during the USMCA review. Third, nutrition. Dairy is a nutrition powerhouse, but continues to be underconsumed by most Americans. I am grateful to you, Senator Welch, for co-authoring the bipartisan Whole Milk for Healthy Kids Act to fix our school nutrition problem, and I urge this committee to swiftly pass this legislation. Finally, H5N1. U.S. dairy farmers continue to work closely with USDA, FDA, and other agencies to safeguard dairy herds and farm employees from highly pathogenic avian influenza. We appreciate USDA's work to accelerate vaccine development and urge that a vaccine be made available as soon as possible. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify. I am happy to answer any questions later.
Thank you, Ms. Stevermer.
Well, good afternoon, Chairman Bozeman, Ranking Member Klobuchar, and members of the committee. I am Lori Stevermer, pork producer from Easton, Minnesota, and president of the National Pork Producers Council. Every morning when I wake up on my family farm, I think about two things. First, producing wholesome, nutritious pork while serving my community and employees. And second, how policies and regulations impact families across America, not just now, but for future generations. For several years, America's over 60,000 pork producers have faced difficult times. While farmers are ever optimistic about the future, we are emerging from multiple years of losing, on average, $30 per pig. Production costs have declined and hog prices have improved, but many farmers have not yet recovered financially from the worst period of losses in our industry's history. To provide certainty, we need to continue farming. American agriculture needs a 5-year farm bill in which pork producers have 3 needs. First, we must address the problems caused by California's Proposition 12, which has increased farmers' operating cost, created business uncertainty, and raised pork prices at the grocery store. As you know, this law reaches far beyond California to include farmers in other states and even other countries. The outcome of Prop 12 defy common sense and create a patchwork of differing state regulations if Congress doesn't act. Prop 12, opposed by both President Trump and President Biden, is harming small and medium family farmers the most. We have followed the processes in place to address this issue, and we are before you because the Supreme Court has said it is a matter for Congress to take up. Second, we must ensure we protect our animals from foreign animal diseases by funding USDA programs for detection, prevention, and rapid response to outbreaks. Third, we must promote our exports by funding the Foreign Market Development Program and Market Access Program. Another matter that deserves this committee's attention is a 5-year reauthorization of the Livestock Mandatory Reporting Program. It ensures reliable and accurate information influencing critical business decisions is available to farmers like myself and others at this table. Farmers across the country desperately need employees. The H-2A visa program must be expanded to include year-round foreign-born workers. Given our ongoing challenges, farmers need assurances we won't be subject to regulations that restrict our ability to buy and sell our animals. For that reason, we urge Congress and the administration to defund and withdraw the Packers and Stockyards rules. Finally, let me say a few words about international trade. Without trade to our customers beyond our borders, we see and feel deep, substantial losses. International trade provides us with an additional $66 a pig. Without those markets for a wide range of products we produce, many of us simply would not be able to continue to farm. U.S. pork producers face tariff and non-tariff barriers to our products in many countries, including China and the EU. Opening new and expanding existing markets is paramount and allows many farms to stay afloat. The best way to do this is through comprehensive trade agreements, eliminating those tariff and non-tariff barriers. We now export more pork to the 20 countries where we have a comprehensive trade agreement than to the other 80 countries where we ship pork. It is also important to realize that there are feed ingredients we import, including amino acids and trace minerals, only available from China. We must keep this in mind as Congress and the administration continue to have conversations on the future of our relationship with China. We are proud of the work we do and appreciate the opportunity to feed American families and to present our perspective on the agricultural economy. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today.
Thank you. Mr. Zimmerman.
Good morning, Chairman Bozeman, Ranking Member Klobuchar, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to share the turkey industry's perspective today. This morning, I'd like to highlight the animal disease portion of the written testimony I submitted for the record. For more than a year, the turkey industry has been dealing with the negative impacts of highly pathogenic avian influenza, as well as another highly consequential respiratory virus, avian metapneumovirus, which has impacted between 60 and 80% of turkey flocks nationwide. In Minnesota alone, 127 cases of HPAI in commercial turkeys have led to the loss of more than 6.6 million birds. And while HPAI is 100% lethal to birds exposed to the virus long enough, AMPV is more subtle but equally impactful due to its ability to significantly reduce egg sets of the breeder stock that produces the next generation of turkeys and cause severe prolonged mortality in commercial flocks. Together, these two respiratory viruses have exponentially increased volatility, supply shortages, and market uncertainty. This 1-2 punch has caused many farmers to quit raising turkeys, with several others on the brink of shutting down. Banks are very concerned about our farms' financial health, and some farmers are struggling to obtain credit after losing 30 to 50% of their flocks to AMPV. HPAI is a terrible disease, but with AMPV, there is no indemnity and no assistance. So I would urge Congress to make AMPV an eligible disease under the USDA's Livestock Indemnity Program. This would assist growers in mitigating economic loss and will go a long way to assist poultry producers who are being hit hard stay on their farms producing the most abundant food supply in the world. On a more positive note, the first imported AMPV modified live vaccine doses have reached Minnesota farms this month, with more on the way to assist farmers nationwide. I want to personally thank the chairman and Ranking Member Klobuchar for leading the charge in supporting the importation of this much-needed imported modified live vaccine for AMPV. I also want to thank USDA for their efforts in getting this across the finish line. However, I also think it's important to acknowledge the industry's incredible frustrations with USDA's review process of an imported modified live vaccine. I appreciate the importance of ensuring the safety of a vaccine and that the AMP vaccine was the first of its kind to ever be approved. However, when an entire industry is at significant risk, it should take a matter of months, not over a year, for a widely used and well-established global vaccine to be imported and available for use. I would encourage the committee to use your experience in evaluating USDA's review process to ensure a faster, more efficient response to future animal disease outbreaks. Unfortunately, AMPV is only half the battle. Time is of the essence on HPAI. A national strategy targeting all potential hosts of H5 influenza is lacking, allowing the virus to spread. The global poultry industry is in crisis, so pursuing a successful vaccination program that doesn't negatively impact trade as part of a stamp-out strategy is the key to significantly reducing disease rates. If the U.S. fails to lead globally on implementing animal health solutions capable of preventing disease and death in commercial poultry, we'll be at a significant disadvantage in world trade. Empowering USDA to increase proactive engagement with trading partners and solidify a new framework to reduce disease outbreaks' impact on the global food supply is essential. In closing, as Congress writes a new farm bill, NTF urges the renewal and robust funding of animal disease programs and the establishment of an HPAI strategic initiative to ensure the turkey industry has the tools necessary to combat the current and future animal health diseases. And I also recognize that Secretary Rollins just announced measures to address HPAI, and we appreciate the urgent attention. But after a brief overview, it seems only to cover the egg-laying industry. As I have stated in my testimony, the turkey industry has been devastated by HPAI, and we ask that any plan also address the urgent needs of the turkey industry. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify today, and look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Thank you. Mr. Westner.
Chairman Bozeman, Ranking Member Klobuchar, and the committee, on behalf of UEP and Roseacre Farms, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to be heard. I'll talk a little more about avian influenza, as my colleague from the turkey industry just did. Since 2015, we have lost 10 million birds to avian influenza, 6 million of those since January 1 of this year. That's 25% of our current production. There's been 162 million poultry since 22 that's been put down. 126 million of those were layers. 792 were backyard flocks. To give you an idea, the normal numbers of layers in this country is 300 to about 315 million. Since 2015, we've now seen an increase we've seen the problems with the dairy, and it's really not hard to find wildlife in the areas that are positive. It is a biosecurity nightmare, and that is really our only method today to deal with it, along with depopulation. A lot of talk today about egg prices. Egg farmers today are not price makers, they're price takers. They do not get to set the market on eggs. It's like a corn and soybean farmer. We take what the price is, and it's done on supply and demand. Demand is extremely very high right now still. That is different than what we've seen in 2015. And my theory on that is people are still shopping for an affordable protein in the store, and so they're still turning back to eggs because there's not a cheaper alternative today. So that's why you're seeing the high demand. I also think the weight loss drugs that are being used in this country today are fueling the protein craze, and so you have people looking for more protein. Another aspect of that is I think the egg shortage is bigger than we know. There's a researcher at North Carolina State, Dr. Ken Anderson, he's well respected. He would estimate the backyard flock in this country at a size of 200 million birds or more. And remember, I told you our commercial flock is 315. I think that avian influenza has devastated the backyard flocks in this country, and people really don't know what's wrong with their birds. So I think those people are now at the store buying eggs also. We have the tool of indemnity, which helps. I would just ask that we continue to look at it. There's been $1.4 billion worth of indemnity paid out since 22. I would ask that we continue to look at that with common sense and fairness. It's a way to have a stopgap measure to keep people in business. And finally, when we get down to vaccination, UEP and Roseacre Farms fully supports vaccination in their industry. We have to control this disease. We have to do it with offense, not defense, which in my opinion is what we've done to this point. We know a farm in Colorado that 1.5 million birds that's went positive 3 times in 3 years. They just got the farm repopulated, and 2 geese fell out of the sky within yards of the first house down there just a few weeks ago. This thing's not going to get better, it's going to get worse. And nobody wants to see trade stopped because we start using vaccine. I looked up on the charts. If you look at the chicken last year that left this country, almost 40% of it went to countries that are also vaccinating. So I can't understand why we can't get together with those countries and figure this out so we don't ruin trade. Nobody wants to hurt anybody in the poultry sector or in ag, period. Dairy, layer, and turkeys need the vaccine. Turkey shouldn't have been left out on what was done today. I hope it was an oversight, but it really needs to be done. Until we start taking this thing seriously, it's not a U.S. problem, it's a global problem. And what's at stake is food security and protein security. We have to put people in the room that are smart. I'm not sure vaccine is 100% the answer, but I think that if we go down that road and we start there, there'll be people work hard and spend a lot of money to try to come up with answers. And I would look for you guys to be leaders in that. It all starts with all of us on whether we're going to fix this or not. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Stevenmer, can you tell us more about how a disruptive patchwork of state laws like Proposition 12 would be on the pork sector, and why it is critical for us to utilize the Farm Bill to prevent these harmful proposals from moving forward?
Well, thank you, Senator Bozeman. In my role as president, I get the opportunity to talk to producers of all sizes, small, medium, large. Some are Prop 12 compliant, some are not. The concern that all of them have is that patchwork of regulations, that if California could put in a set of regulations, another state can do the same thing. And that patchwork causes chaos in our business because it's hard to make business decisions, it's hard to make changes, not knowing what the next regulation might be. And that's why it's important that Congress addresses this. The Supreme Court said it was Congress's issue to deal with, and so we need to have it addressed in the Farm Bill to provide that certainty so that we can make business decisions. I would say it's also generational. When we look at the next generation of farmers determining if they want to come into their family farms and they see that uncertainty, it's hard for them to know if that's where they want to be. Thank you.
Very good. Mr. Wehrbein, over the past 4 years, the Biden administration went far beyond its mandate under the Packers and Stockyards Act to implement costly, burdensome rules, often without being able to show any quantifiable benefit to producers. Can you talk about the need to prevent these rules from proliferating in the future and the impact that regulatory overreach has on livestock producers?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We feed about 70% of the cattle in our feedlot are customer cattle from Okeechobee, Florida to the Big Island of Hawaii and all points in between. And because of the opportunities for marketing, we have a lot of different ways that we can market their cattle so that they can be paid for the superior genetics and superior animal husbandry and so forth that makes a superior product. A lot of those opportunities would have been taken away by the changes to the Packers and Stockyards Act. We do not need the federal government shouldering their way in and telling us how to market cattle. And so it would be very good if we could eliminate the ability for the government to do that. And so that's a hardship on us. And these people, good producers producing good product, need to be able to be paid on the merit of their product.
Very good. Thank you. Mr. Wessner, thank you for your comments on avian influenza. Can you speak about the importance of strengthening the work between growers, USDA, and states? And you talked about this a little bit, in states to respond to avian influenza and to provide support to producers when they are impacted.
Well, I appreciate the question. Our experience with USDA in navigating the bird flu problem, for the most part, has been very positive. if I would say there's one way to improve it is sometimes you have to get bureaucracy out of the way and get decisions made. And I think that's you've heard that before this morning with some of the other testimonies. But I would encourage USDA to tackle this bird flu thing head on with money and funding to support research. You know, I was brought a product to me this week that is not a vaccine, that is a pharmaceutical that is being used in Russia with good results, and it actually cures avian influenza. Those are kind of things. Is it real? Is it going? I'm not sure, but we have to look at it, and we have to go down and look at things like that to try to find an answer to this thing. You know, there's people going hungry in this country, and there's people going hungry all over this world, and we have to protect the protein. So USDA and anything that the federal government can do to be supportive of that research, and, you know, vaccines probably not the answer today, but it's the only tool that we have. And I really believe that we're going to get better vaccines, and we're going to get, right now people haven't worked hard on vaccines because they don't know if they're ever going to be able to sell it, or if it's ever going to be able to be used because they didn't think it was going to. So the fact that the announcements today, I'm hoping we've turned a corner, that there'll be cooperation between USDA, with the farmers, with the researchers, that we really come up with an answer that makes sense for avian influenza and makes sense for the American consumer ultimately.
Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you very much, and thank you. We've had not just the vote, but I have a judiciary hearing, a commerce hearing, and I've now put on 5,100 steps, Mr. Chairman. I just looked, running back and forth. So, avian flu. I raised the importance of a coordinated response to this virus with Secretary Rollins during her confirmation hearing, along with Senators Ernst and Fetterman. We led a request of her, and I'm looking forward to reading the document today where the Secretary has come out with the coordinated response. Mr. Zimmerman, how would a strategic initiative bringing together animal health experts from across impacted industry at USDA enhance our ability to mitigate and prevent the spread of avian flu? And I suppose you want to emphasize how important it is to include turkeys in this response.
Thank you, Senator. And yes, we do hope that turkeys are included in future drafts of the announcement today. We've been great partners with APHIS and USDA in mitigating the disease outbreaks that we've had, and we're very thankful for their support. Looking forward, we've made incredible strides in biosecurity, and I question whether that should be at the forefront anymore. We're going to continue to push biosecurity, but we have to look at new solutions. And a strategic initiative around HPI would help us do that. We need to look into how, when and if we can address the trade issues, how we will deploy a vaccine. We know it won't go to every bird right away all the time. We know what birds we have to protect, the layer flocks, obviously. And
I see Mr. Wesner nodding his head.
We're in
Okay,
agreement
keep
here.
going.
So we need to have a plan in place because we know that our trading partners are going to request that plan. So getting the experts together to address these issues that haven't been addressed yet, but just being prepared for the eventuality that we are going to be able to vaccinate at some point in time in the future, and then also researching other novel ways to vaccinate. Right now, it would be an injectable vaccine, and we cannot inject every bird in the country. We have to look at other modes of delivering vaccine for the future. So anything we can do to further our knowledge of how to mitigate this disease would be incredibly helpful.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Stevemer, thank you for being here. Can you talk about how the threat of tariffs and potential retaliation from trading partners like Mexico, China, Canada, really the whole world, could impact pork producers? And have you already seen impacts in the futures market? Could you talk about the tariffs on Canada in particular?
Yeah, thank you, Senator Klobuchar. About 25% of our pork products are exported. That adds about $66 worth of value. The U.S. pork industry is a net exporter, so we export more than we import. So any type of retaliatory tariff back on us would be concerning. It could be disruptive to our markets. I think it's also important to note that we get a number of weaned pigs, small little pigs from Canada into the U.S., especially in Minnesota. And so the increase in tariffs would increase the cost of those piglets into the United States and then, affect our cost of production. So The countries that we have the comprehensive trade agreements with, Canada, Mexico, they are our top
USMCA.
USMCA, those are our top exporting markets. We are an integrated market here between Canada, US, and Mexico. I explained some of the ways we do that. We also talk about animal health issues together, so we're good partners, and once again, any type of tariffs, retaliatory tariffs, especially that would disrupt that business, would be very concerning.
All right, I appreciate your answer. Mr. Horgan, thinking of USMCA, knowing we need some improvements there on dairy, but also knowing how important that agreement is. I just noted that before the state agriculture commissioners that I addressed yesterday. And number of us up here crafted improvements to the former Dairy Margin Protection Program, which led to the creation of the Dairy Margin Coverage Program in the 2018 Farm Bill. The DMC program serves as a safety net for dairy farms across the U.S. As you know, it's working well, but I know there's some improvements we can make talking to my own dairy farmers in Minnesota. What changes would you like to see in the upcoming Farm Bill to improve the Dairy Margin Coverage Program's ability to assist producers?
Thank you for the question. As I stated, DMC is very important to the dairy industry, and naturally we'd like to improve it. Fundamentally, we'd at least like to stay status quo with all the budget talks. National Milk Producers Federation, which I represent here today, could not come to an agreement on which way to go, so status quo is where they are. Dairy Farmers of America would like to see it represent a more average size farm in this country. A 5 million pound level, which it represents now, is probably a 8 or 10-year-old number. I think the average dairy is up closer to 7 or 8 million pounds of milk, which would justify coverage. We'd also like to see the basis increase, the production history. Right now, they're working with 2011 to 2013 numbers. Dairy is a growth industry. We consistently have to produce more milk each year as the price seems to stay pretty level, so getting more efficient and doing everything we do on the dairy means growing production, and so raising that production history would be helpful.
Got it. Thank you very much, all of you.
Senator Ernst.
Thank you, Chair Bozeman and Ranking Member Klobuchar, and thank you to the second panel of witnesses for being here today. And as many of you displayed in your testimonies this morning, it is clear that the ag economy is struggling. And last year, Congress was able to provide some temporary support, but we really do need lasting changes in the 5-year Farm Bill. One that will actually focus on the farm. So, Mr. Wessner and Mr. Zimmerman, from your statements a moment ago, you had said the continued spread of highly pathogenic avian influenza, or HPAI, is a major concern for many farmers, and especially for farmers in my state. In the last few months, we've seen over 7 million birds just in Iowa alone that have been impacted. And unfortunately, it's a number that continues to grow every single day, even with farmers who are adopting the heightened biosecurity protocols and states that are implementing strict movement controls. So while there is a significant amount of work ahead, I am thankful that this remains a top priority for the administration. And we did see earlier today Secretary Rollins announcing several steps she is taking to help mitigate the ongoing outbreak. So I'm grateful that the Secretary has taken a number of the suggestions that my friend and colleague Senator Fetterman and I provided to the Department of Agriculture last week. One of the strategies includes developing new vaccines that can effectively protect laying hens and turkeys from the virus. USDA is also creating a task force to effectively work through any trade concerns and maintain export access to international markets. So for both of you, let's start with Mr. Wessner. Thank you. Can you explain why a vaccination strategy is so important to preventing the spread of HPAI, and what do the next steps look like in protecting our trade?
Well, the vaccination today is I believe, our only protection that we're going to have. If you look at diseases that we've had in the poultry industry in the past, there's some of them that just the only way to get past it was through vaccine. And I think this avian influenza, now that it's mutated to other species, and we've even had one human death in the United States, vaccine needs to be forefront, but they need to be the right vaccines. They need to be safe. And this isn't a short term. This isn't going to happen next year. This isn't going to happen. We're talking a 2 to 5 year thing to really, in my opinion, to really see much advancement, improvement. But I think when the light turns green, and researchers and the people that do know that it's going to be used, I think you'll see advancements maybe come quicker than I think. But we have to go down this road, because right now today it's the only answer we have. To do nothing is wrong. Hopefully they'll come up with better answers. Right now the vaccines today, as Mr. Zimmerman said, taking a needle to 300 million chickens across this country. A lot of them now cage-free, 45% or whatever. That's not an easy task and easily done. Someone's going to help us come up with a vaccine that makes sense. But today what we have is what we have, and we have to start somewhere. And I applaud the administration for making that step today. I just hope it doesn't take too long.
Thank you.
And I hope that we move roadblocks out of the way, and that we go after it with a vengeance, because there's a lot on the line.
I appreciate that. Mr. Zimmerman?
We're beyond biosecurity. We've done as much as we can. Some of our most strict biosecure facilities are still contracting AMPV and HPAI. So we need to look at new tools for our toolbox. And the primary tool we have to look at is vaccination. The viral load in the environment has exponentially increased, with dairy herds being infected now, and cats and other species. So, we've just seen a great increase in the incidence of HPI in Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio, where before it was in the Midwest. So we can't track it like we used to because of the viral load that is present in the environment. So the strategic initiative would help us decide the logistics and the behind the doors work that needs to be done to roll out a vaccine strategy for multiple species, and I'm including dairy in this, to get the viral load diminished in the United States. We don't plan to vaccinate every bird right away, but if we can reduce that viral load through specific vaccination in different regions while addressing the trade issues, we're going to take a giant step towards controlling this virus.
Thank you. I appreciate it. HPAI is such a huge issue right now for all Americans. And I apologize, I am out of time. I did want to address Proposition 12 as well. I'll submit my question for the record. But this also, coming from Iowa, the #1 pork producing state in the nation, it's a big deal. And we've got to figure this out. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Senator Hyde-Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, panel, for being here. I like the two panels because we have an opportunity to get to visit with many of you throughout the country. Right now, I have two things I want to address. I'm trying to be brief, and this one is for Mr. Lehfeldt. I understand the U.S. sheep inventory has been so reduced because of the decline, what we're competing with in other countries. And I have been texting with Cole Estelle, and I think that you were emailing with him last night. I met with him. He has an operation in northern Nevada and California, and also Mike Bardsley, that they were very, very concerned. And I promised them that I would certainly address this in this committee. The imports from Australia and New Zealand, they visited with me, has increased like 500% in the last many years, 30 years. But it seems to me that U.S. sheep producers are at a distinct disadvantage compared to our foreign competitors. And I'm concerned that the high volume and the low price imports could put our producers completely out of business. And this is certainly what Mr. Estelle and Mr. Bardsley was telling me. Could you shed some light on the challenges our domestic producers are facing with the respect of high volume of the cheap imports that we are seeing?
Yeah, thank you for your question. I appreciate you meeting with sheep producers out there, and it's a desperate need in a lot of places in the sheep industry. Right now, we're close to 30% domestic, 70% imports right out of the gate, we have a 40% currency deficit that we have to overcome, that producers have absolutely no control over. We struggle, especially out west, with predator control. Our importers and those that bring in the imported lambs do not have those issues. We struggle with labor. We've talked about that in states of California, Colorado, and Oregon. Even the mandated federal level has been increased to a level that's completely unattainable for these sheep producers, and that's why we're losing some of these big flocks. So it's very, very important that we understand these issues. In California, most of the largest producers of sheep are actually delivering wildfire control in those areas. In my state of Montana, we're delivering noxious weed control on many cattle ranchers and fish and game sites instead of a pesticide or a herbicide application. So there's so many opportunities with sheep. We just need that little pressure to make sure we can be competitive.
Great. Thank you very, very much. And another one, top priority of mine in this new administration and the immediate future is I want to talk about estate taxes, death taxes. I just don't think there's anything this Congress can do that would be more vitally important to keeping acreage in production than addressing this. Mr. Wehrbein, I'll address you on this one. I want to talk about that, but it's a death sentence for so many family farms and businesses. And, we're cattle producers ourselves, and we see this all the time with people in our stockyard that sell cattle. But I know what it's like to operate on limited cash for all of these people, many of us, which we have a lot of value tied up in the land. But the death tax, it is a massive burden on so many cattle producers and farm operations, forcing these families to sell off livestock, to sell off property after a death of a family member because it's simply to pay the IRS. And I am thrilled that our Senate Majority Leader, Thune, has introduced legislation to repeal the death tax. You would see me elated dancing in the halls of Congress if this happens. And I'm proud to be a co-sponsor of it. But while tax legislation doesn't fall under this committee's jurisdiction, the farm community needs to be more vocal about the death taxes. So many people don't realize how many acres are taken out of production when we're trying to feed this country because of this. We are losing acreage all the time. So will you please elaborate on the burden of the death tax in U.S. cattle operations?
Amen, and thank you for that question. The way land is appreciated and the value of it now, which of course is a good thing for the owner of it, as you said, when it changes hands at a death, then the cost, they can either have to sell or take on great debt to pay the tax on it. So this is a huge one, and we were very pleased with what the Trump administration did in their first term, and we know that he wants to reauthorize the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and maybe even improve on it. And so even with the higher level that is in it now, that even needs to be more. And so I couldn't agree with you more that is a big one for landowners. And in agriculture, which is high volume, low margin, it's especially a hardship. And so we appreciate your concern, and we will be working closely with the administration toward that end.
Thank you very much, and I'm out of time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Hovind.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I work closely with our outstanding chairman, Senator Bozeman, and also ranking member, Senator Klobuchar. In addition, I chair Ag Appropriations, and we have the Commodity Credit Corporation program under that. And it's vitally important, and keeping that tool going forward as we work on the Farm Bill is going to be incredibly important. I want to point to two examples. The first is at the end of the year, because we were not able to put a new Farm Bill in place, and some of the members have talked about the importance of that and getting it done, and I, of course, agree with that very strongly, but we were able to put a one-year extension in place, and we secured $33 billion in emergency assistance, which came from the CCC for our farmers and ranchers. In addition, now we're looking at addressing avian influenza, and we're using funding from the CCC. So, you know, day in and day out between farm bills, when all these things happen out in farm country, we need that tool to have the flexibility to respond to our farmers and ranchers. And there's two instances right now here today that point out how important that is, and to be able to work with the administration to use it in an effective way. So first, you, Mr. Wehrbein, your thoughts on as we get work to get this $33 billion out in emergency assistance, do you have any specific recommendations as to how that could be done most effectively?
Well, the first thing would be to talk with the people that need it and hear what they need, rather than make the decisions up here, you know, through a central planning idea.
So you don't think Senator Bozeman should just arbitrarily make the decisions all by himself?
I don't think that's what I meant.
Oh.
But as the senator would do and the chairman would do, would be to talk to the people that are out there in the need.
Sure.
And there is a great need, and it needs to be expedited so it's quicker, because they need it quickly.
Yeah, it's really key to getting to the next farm bill with updated reference prices and affordable crop insurance and the other things we need. And enhanced LIP, ELAP, and LFP for our ranchers, right? Those kind of tools, right? So it's vital as a bridge to get to where we need to go with the next farm bill. You would agree?
Agreed.
Yeah. Okay, and then Mr. Wester and Mr. Zimmerman, you may want to both comment on this. So Secretary of Agriculture Brooke Rollins came out with a comprehensive plan this morning to address avian influenza. And I really want to commend her for that. She's hit the ground running. We think she's going to be a very strong, very effective Secretary of Agriculture, and we're already working with her closely. Her 5-point plan, I don't know if you all have had a chance to take a look at it. It looks to me like it's a solid plan. It's comprehensive. Again, it will be CCC funding. And we're working with her on it very closely and intend to continue to do that. This is a huge problem, this avian influenza. Obviously, the price of eggs is through the roof. Have you had a chance to look at that 5-part plan, and do you have any specific thoughts or input that might be helpful as we work to implement it?
I looked at it briefly before we walked in here this morning. I think it's a good start. I think it's a good start, and the proof's in the details, when it gets right down to it. And I think that, we just have to go down the road and see where it leads. I think all the things that we were worried about, they have addressed somewhat in it. And when you look at the details, we'll just have to see if it makes sense how we're going to attack it. But you had to start somewhere. And I commend the administration, and I commend her for taking that step. And it doesn't matter what happens in the past. It only matters what we do today and what we do tomorrow. And I'm excited about it. And I think it's a good start. I really do. We've got to come up with funding, maybe for our national poultry research programs and things to really look at these things, not just deal with this problem today, but to deal with problems in the next decade and the decade after that, so we don't have to relive these things. And I think it can be done, but we can't do it pulling funding out of some of these research labs where a lot of smart people can really come together and get answers.
Yeah, well, this is a $1 billion comprehensive plan, and so I think she's really taken the right approach here. And obviously, implementing it, we need to work closely with folks like you, because it's complicated. Trade affects so many things.
It does.
To get it right and to make sure it's effective as expeditiously as possible. Anything you wanted to add, Mr. Zimmerman?
Yeah, we've obviously seen the plan and looked over it briefly. Obviously, this is a very fluid situation that we're dealing with, but we do want to make sure that all harbors of the virus are included in this plan: eggs, poultry, and also dairy cattle and wildlife also. Because if we leave sources of the virus in the environment, we're just going to be reinfected. And I think we can all agree that depopulation is an incredibly expensive, economically and emotionally devastating thing to have to do. So as we move forward, we can look at different tools, vaccine to be one of them, and if we can, on a parallel path, make sure the trade issues are addressed, long-term, this will be a much more financially viable solution to this virus outbreak than what our current path has been. So I thank Secretary Rollins for looking at novel approaches to dealing with high-path avian influenza.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator from Kansas, Senator Moran.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I've chaired hearings before, and the last thing you want is somebody to walk in at the last minute and put their nameplate up and ask a question. But I don't know what has been asked or answered, but I did not want to miss the chance to get this panel's instructions to me and to the Senate about the importance of trade and what happens in the current circumstance with the potential of tariffs. And maybe the easiest question in that arena is what countries could we enter into bilateral trade agreements with that would be the most beneficial and something we might actually be able to achieve? And I direct that to whoever has the best answer.
I'll give a shot at it.
Thank you.
I would say that we have an issue with two countries that perhaps we shouldn't be in an agreement with, and that's Brazil and Paraguay, because they can't live or won't live up to the health standards that everybody else does. And then we have an agreement with Australia, and we've bought beef from them for 20 years and haven't spent one red cent with us. So it's not just having an agreement, but it's also enforcing the agreement. So that would be an example of what you're talking about.
So perhaps what you're suggesting to me is that rather than looking for that next new market, make sure that the agreements that we have in place today are ones that are being enforced and the advantages of trade are being realized.
That's the way I would see it.
Thank you.
Senator, the dairy industry exports almost 20% of our products daily, weekly, monthly. About 40% of those go to our two neighboring countries, Canada and Mexico. I would encourage this committee administration to, when we look at the UMCA agreement, to look at our partners to the north in Canada. They have a history of kind of circumventing the process they agreed to, and many of their TRQs are traditionally given to companies from Canada in this country for the trade, so it kind of leaves us out. That plan needs to be revised with them. Our southern border, Mexico, they're a great trade partner, and from them I would hope we would do no harm. Thank you.
Let me follow up with that, and then I'll conclude, Mr. Chairman. Is there any efforts underway, administration to dairymen or livestock producers, others, in having those, particularly about USMCA? At least the press reports that there's going to be new USMCA agreements or negotiated attempts at new agreements. Is there conversations going on between the administration and are those personnel yet in place, although we're in the process of confirming one of the important players today?
As I understand it, the USMCA with Canada will be reviewed as they've been in violation of some of the parts of the agreement. So I think it is.
And at some point in time, you expect to have input into those disagreements?
We hope to.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
I want to thank again all of our witnesses for being here. You all did a tremendous job, and this is certainly very, very helpful, and we appreciate your participation. I know you've got other things to do, but both panels represented their industries very, very well. The record will remain open for 5 business days, and with that, today's hearing is now adjourned.